Tonight we return to the winter of 1946 when archaeologists began cutting into the silent mound of Abu Shahrin in southern Iraq. Beneath windblown sand, they uncovered a sequence of temples built repeatedly upon the same sacred ground. Iraqi archaeologist Fuad Safar and British archaeologist Seton Lloyd directed work that revealed foundations stretching deep into prehistoric time. Their trenches suggested that worship had continued here for thousands of years, layer resting carefully upon older layer. Researchers connected with the British Museum and major universities later examined the pottery walls and offering remains found across the site. What emerged was not a complete ritual manual, neatly preserved for modern curiosity. Ancient priests were inconsiderate that way. Instead, the earth offered scattered traces of ceremonies once performed for Enki, Lord of Wisdom and the hidden freshwater deep. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You may also share your location and local time in the comments. It is comforting to imagine listeners gathering quietly across many distant places while Eridu rises again beneath an ancient sky. You stand now at the edge of a vanished marshland, where water and desert once met uneasily. The air carries the smell of damp reeds, warm mud, and smoke from distant cooking fires. Insects drift above shallow pools, catching the last pale light before evening settles over the plain. Beneath your feet, the ground feels soft, although centuries of rebuilding have hardened the temple platform nearby. Eridu does not greet you with monumental gates or towering walls. Its earliest sacred buildings are modest, almost fragile, made from mud brick shaped by human hands. Yet each rebuilding enlarges the sanctuary, as though every generation feels compelled to honor the same mysterious presence. Walls thicken, platforms rise, and rooms become more carefully ordered around a central place of offering. Archaeological records confirm that Eridu contained one of the longest temple sequences known from ancient Mesopotamia. The earliest structures belonged to communities that lived before writing, kingship, and formal city administration fully developed. They left no explanatory inscriptions beside their altars. They simply built, worshipped, repaired, and built again. That repetition matters. You notice how each temple follows the memory of the structure beneath it. Corners align with older corners, while new floors cover ash, broken bowls, and discarded ritual debris. The builders could have chosen another place. They did not. Something about this patch of earth remained sacred beyond ordinary human convenience. At the center stands a raised platform or altar, approached through carefully arranged interior space. Nearby, archaeologists found fish bones, vessels, and traces of meals that may have carried ceremonial meaning. These remains do not reveal spoken prayers, but they suggest patterned offerings rather than casual household eating. Food entered the sanctuary, changed its meaning, and perhaps became nourishment for a divine household. Enki's later traditions make the location especially appropriate. He becomes the god of the freshwater abyss beneath the earth. The source, called the Abzu, this unseen reservoir, was believed to feed springs, wells, rivers, and the fertile margins of human life. Eridu stood near marshes where fresh and salty waters mingled, creating a landscape that seemed half-formed and always shifting. You can understand why such a place inspired sacred imagination. Islands appeared and vanished among reeds. Channels changed direction without consulting anyone. Mist lifted from the water before sunrise, hiding boats and animals within pale silence. Even solid ground felt temporary. To later Sumerians, Enki was not merely a water god. He governed wisdom, craftsmanship, purification, fertility, magic, and the ordering of civilization. His priesthood therefore served a deity whose influence flowed through nearly every part of organized life. Water cleansed the body, sustained crops, filled canals, and carried boats between distant settlements. Knowledge worked similarly, moving quietly while shaping everything it touched. The temple itself may have been understood as Enki's earthly residence. Priests did not simply gather there for occasional public devotion. They maintained a divine household through routines of washing, feeding, dressing, guarding, and praising. Much of this service happened away from ordinary eyes, behind walls that preserved silence and hierarchy. A council decree from later Mesopotamian cities proves that temple personnel could hold precisely defined duties. Some prepared offerings, while others guarded entrances or performed purification. Eridu's earliest arrangement remains less visible, although the architectural pattern suggests growing ceremonial organization. As the sanctuary expanded, human responsibilities likely expanded beside it. Perhaps one attendant carried water before dawn, another may have prepared grain, oil, fish, or fragrant plants. Someone swept the floor, checked sealed containers, and removed yesterday's offerings with practiced care. None of these actions needed grandeur. Sacred routine often depends upon ordinary tasks repeated without failure. Your fingers brush the imagined surface of a mud brick wall. It feels rough and cool before sunrise, its plaster carrying faint traces of smoke. Somewhere inside, a vessel touches stone with a hollow sound. Sandals squeak against a damp floor, then stop. The temple listens. No surviving tablet gives you the complete liturgy of these earliest priests. Writing had not yet appeared when the oldest sanctuaries were constructed. Later texts preserve hymns, incantations, temple laments, and divine myths connected with Enki. Yet those compositions belong to societies already separated from Eridu's beginnings by immense stretches of time. This creates one of the central scholarly debates surrounding the site. Did later Sumerian traditions preserve genuine memories of prehistoric worship, or did priests invent an ancient past to strengthen their authority? Some historians emphasize continuity within the temple sequence. Others warn that architecture cannot prove the survival of specific words, gestures, or beliefs. The uncertainty is important. It prevents the ruins from becoming a convenient stage for whatever story modern observers prefer. Mud brick foundations can reveal where people moved and gathered. They cannot repeat the prayer spoken over a bowl of water 6,000 years ago. Still, patterns remain. The sanctuary repeatedly includes a central offering place, controlled access, and rooms suited to storage or preparation. Such features imply movement governed by custom rather than random activity. People entered by certain routes, carried certain objects, and approached the sacred center according to accepted rules. You begin to imagine the priesthood not as a fixed institution, but as a tradition slowly gathering shape. At first, perhaps one respected household tends the shrine. Later, specialized attendants inherit responsibilities, memorize procedures, and guard knowledge from careless hands. Generations pass, and simple actions become ancient obligations. A curious fringe theory sometimes links Enki's servants with later images of fish-cloaked sages. These figures, known from much later Mesopotamian art and literature, were believed to carry wisdom from the watery deep. Some modern writers suggest their strange garments preserve memories of prehistoric ritual clothing worn at Eridu. The proposal remains highly speculative. Fish skins decay, early costumes leave few traces, and later symbolism can easily be projected backward. Yet the image is strangely fitting, a quiet priest standing beside dark water, dressed as though knowledge itself had emerged from the marsh. You hear reeds moving beyond the temple platform. The sound resembles whispering. Although there is no wind within the courtyard, a bowl of clear water rests near the altar, reflecting a narrow opening in the roof. Its surface trembles when distant footsteps cross the floor. Perhaps the earliest liturgy begins there, not with a grand hymn, but with water carried carefully into a darkened room, not with royal ceremony, but with attention given to place, purity, and repetition. The priest knows which vessel to use, where to stand, and when silence must be preserved. Nothing is written down. Memory is the archive. Oxford historians studying early Mesopotamian religion have often emphasized that ritual knowledge could exist long before written theology. Communities do not need libraries to preserve sacred routines. They need teachers, witnesses, and fear of performing the act incorrectly. A mistaken gesture may seem trivial now, but ancient worshippers could view it as a disturbance within the world's fragile order. That possibility gives Eridu its quiet unease. Beneath each temple floor lies another floor, and beneath that, another sacred room. Every generation covers the work of earlier hands while insisting that the holy place remains unchanged. The building grows newer, yet the claim grows older. You remain beside the excavation trench as evening deepens. Numbered layers descend into shadow, each representing lives, ceremonies, and voices no microphone can recover. Archaeology has exposed the rooms, but not the exact sequence of sacred words. It has uncovered vessels, bones, plaster, ash, and thresholds worn by repeated passage. The missing liturgy survives only through its consequences. It survives in the stubborn rebuilding of the sanctuary. It survives in offerings placed where ordinary meals would make little sense. It survives in the enduring association between Eridu, sacred water, and the god later called Enki. These clues do not provide certainty, but they form the edges of a forgotten ritual world. You look once more toward the marsh, where darkness settles upon the channels, somewhere beyond sight. Water continues moving beneath the ground. The priests believe that hidden depths supported cities, gardens, animals, and human breath. Perhaps their ceremonies were attempts to keep that unseen generosity flowing. Perhaps they feared it could stop. For now, the temple remains closed within the night. Its priests move softly behind walls of mud brick, carrying bowls whose contents catch the faintest light. Their words are lost, but their careful movements have left marks beneath the dust, and you have only begun to notice them. The scent of wet clay reaches you as morning spreads across the southern plain. Low sunlight gleams upon channels that wind between reed beds, shallow lagoons, and islands of dark soil. A narrow boat slides through the water, pushed by a pole into the soft bed below. Its passenger carries woven baskets filled with fish, rushes, and lumps of black bitumen. Ahead, Eridu gathers slowly from the haze. It does not resemble the crowded stone cities that later generations will build. There are no marble avenues, iron-pawed gates, or commanding towers. Small houses stand upon patches of firmer ground, their pale walls shaped from mud mixed with chopped reeds. Smoke rises through roof openings, carrying the fragrance of grain porridge, burning dung, and dried herb. The settlement grows where survival requires patience. Rainfall is uncertain. Summer heat is severe, and useful land depends upon water moving through fragile channels. Families must cooperate when banks collapse or silt blocks a canal. One household cannot manage the landscape alone. The marsh itself quietly teaches organization. You step onto a landing made from packed reeds and mud. The surface bends slightly beneath your weight. Children crouch near the water, collecting shellfish with quick fingers. A woman repairs a mat while another shape-stamp clay into a bowl. Somewhere nearby, a stone grinds grain with a steady, sleepy rhythm. These ordinary sounds form the pulse of early urban life. Civilization does not arrive with trumpets. It appears through repeated agreements concerning water, labour, storage, and trust. Someone decides when a channel must be cleared. Someone records which household supplied baskets of barley. Someone settles an argument over a field boundary. Records from later Mesopotamian communities confirm that irrigation demanded coordinated labour and careful seasonal planning. Eridu developed within this demanding environment during the Ubaid period. when villages across southern Mesopotamia became larger and more connected. Archaeologists identify this world through distinctive painted pottery, communal buildings, and shared architectural customs. The name Eridu belongs to a later written age, yet the settlement beneath that name reaches far deeper. Its first inhabitants lived near the head of the ancient gulf, where rivers, marshes, and tidal waters created a shifting frontier. The shoreline stood much farther inland than it does today. Fresh water and salt water pressed against each other across a broad, uncertain landscape. Your sandals sink into a damp street between houses. There is little privacy here. Voices pass through thin walls, and cooking aromas drift freely between courtyards. Neighbours know who wakes late, who argues loudly, and who has somehow acquired an impressive number of onions. Domestic buildings reveal a society arranged around households. Rooms cluster around central spaces where food is prepared. Tools are stored, and family work unfolds. Roofs provide sleeping areas during hot nights. Courtyards collect daylight while protecting people from the strongest winds. Mud brick makes construction practical, but it also makes maintenance endless. Rain softens walls, heat opens cracks, floodwater can erase a room within hours. Every household becomes familiar with plastering, patching, and rebuilding. Permanence requires constant human effort. This habit shapes the settlement itself. Old walls collapse and are levelled. New rooms rise over them. Streets grow higher as rubbish. Broken pottery and building debris accumulate. The town gradually lifts itself above the plain, not through one great plan, but through thousands of small acts. At the settlement's heart, communal architecture becomes more carefully arranged than surrounding homes. Its elevated rooms create a visible centre within the low landscape. People approaching by boat can recognise the sacred precinct from a distance. The building announces shared identity without needing written signs. Scholars still debate when Eridu should properly be called a city. Some emphasise its ceremonial importance and long occupation. Others argue that population size, administrative complexity, and economic specialisation remained limited during its earliest phases. The answer depends partly upon what anyone expects a city to be. Perhaps a city begins with walls and crowded streets. Perhaps it begins when strangers agree to maintain the same watercourse. It may begin when one sacred building becomes important to people living beyond the nearest cluster of houses. Eridu seems to hover between these definitions. It is a settlement, a ritual centre, and a gathering point within a watery region. Farmers bring grain from cultivated plots. Fishers arrive from deeper marshes. Craftspeople exchange pottery, baskets, stone tools, and shell ornaments. Travellers carry stories from communities hidden beyond the horizon. The flat plain offers few natural resources besides clay, reeds, water, and animal life. Timber, hard stone, and metal must come from distant lands. Their presence reveals networks stretching toward the mountains and across the gulf. Even in this early age, Eridu is not isolated. A bead of coloured stone may travel farther than any person who wears it. It passes through hands, boats, and settlements whose names will never be recorded. By the time it reaches Eridu, it carries invisible evidence of negotiation and desire. Bitumen arrives from natural deposits and becomes essential within the marshland. Workers use it to seal baskets, strengthen boats, and protect structures from moisture. Its sharp smell hangs around workshops near the water. Black streaks stain fingers and refuse to disappear easily, which feels strangely reassuring in a world made mostly from dissolving mud. A curious tradition preserved in much later writing claims that kingship descended from heaven first at Eridu. The list assigns impossibly long reigns to rulers who supposedly governed before a great flood. No archaeological evidence confirms such lifespans, and historians treat them as mythology rather than ordinary chronology. Yet the choice of Eridu is revealing. Later scribes imagined the oldest city as the first seat of organised authority. They looked across the enormous distance separating them from its beginnings and placed kingship there, close to the sacred waters. Some fringe interpretations treat those fantastic reigns as distorted memories of lost dynasties or forgotten visitors. More cautious scholarship sees symbolic numbers expressing divine order and remote antiquity. The tale remains valuable not because it provides a secret calendar, but because it shows how ancient Mesopotamians imagined their own origins. You walk toward the cultivated edge of the settlement. Narrow fields follow the canals, their green surfaces contrasting sharply with the pale horizon. Barley bends in the warm air. Date palms rise near wetter ground, offering fruit, shade, fibre, and timber. Agriculture brings abundance, but never certainty. Too little water leaves the soil hard and useless. Too much water destroys banks and drowns young crops. Salt gathers when irrigation is poorly managed, gradually weakening the fields. Prosperity depends upon balance, observation, and collective memory. Older farmers read the landscape through colour, smell, and texture. They notice when water grows bitter or when mud settles unusually thick. Their knowledge passes through demonstration rather than formal instruction. A child learns by carrying baskets, watching gates, and hearing warnings repeated beside the canal. The city grows from such knowledge. Priests may oversee ceremonies, but fishers, farmers, builders, potters, and boat workers sustain the settlement each day. Their labour creates the surplus that allows specialised duties to develop. Their agreements make communal authority possible. Even in gathers above the marsh, boats return with nets spread across their bows. Goats press into narrow enclosures, complaining with impressive determination. Lamps appear within doorways, each flame trembling against smooth plaster. From higher ground, Eridu seems almost weightless. Its houses blend with the earth that formed them. Its waterways reflect a sky turning violet and gold. Nothing suggests that later generations will remember this place as the beginning of urban order. Yet something new is happening. Human life is becoming concentrated, coordinated, and dependent upon institutions larger than any household. Sacred authority, shared labour, long-distance exchange, and environmental knowledge are joining within one fragile settlement. The process remains unfinished, uncertain, and vulnerable to every change in water. Night settles gently across the reed beds. Voices fade behind mud brick walls, while insects continue their soft music above the channels. Eridu rests beside the ancient waters, neither village nor metropolis, but something quietly becoming both. Coolness gathers around your ankles as you descend into the imagined chambers beneath Enki's sanctuary. The air smells of wet stone, cedar oil, and clay sealed within darkness. Somewhere below, water presses against the earth with patient and invisible weight. It does not roar or sparkle beneath sunlight. It simply waits, hidden beneath every field, canal, garden, and human settlement. This unseen reservoir belongs to Enki. In Sumerian tradition, he rules the deep freshwater domain beneath the world. Later scribes describe this realm as the source from which life-giving waters rise. Wells reach toward it, springs reveal it, and rivers carry its generosity across the plain. The ocean may appear endless, but salt water cannot sustain crops or quench human thirst. Enki commands the sweeter and more secret water. That distinction gives him an unusual power. He governs what cannot be seen directly, yet remains necessary for survival. His presence lies beneath ordinary experience, supporting life without demanding constant notice. A farmer may watch clouds and canals, but the deeper source remains beyond his sight. Enki therefore becomes a god of concealed causes. Your mind drifts toward his image upon ancient cylinder seals. He often sits upon a throne while streams flow from his shoulders. Fish swim within those streams, and attendants stand nearby with vessels or symbols of office. The scene looks peaceful, although its meaning reaches far beyond decoration. The flowing water shows abundance under control. It does not burst wildly from the god's body. It follows ordered paths, carrying fertility outward into the world. Enki appears as the intelligence that guides natural power toward useful purpose. Ancient records confirm that his identity extended far beyond water. He was associated with wisdom, craftsmanship, ritual knowledge, purification, magic, fertility, and clever speech. He understood how things were made, how they were repaired, and how disorder might be quietly corrected. This made him especially important to priests, builders, healers, scribes, and rulers. A warrior god could win a battle, a storm god could break a drought. Enki offered something subtler. He provided solutions. In many stories, the other gods confront a crisis created by anger, pride, or poor planning. Enki listens, considers, and finds a path through the difficulty. He rarely solves problems through direct force. Instead, he uses intelligence, secrecy, persuasion, or carefully chosen words. You can almost hear the gentle sarcasm hidden within these tales. Divine assemblies behave with remarkable dignity until someone makes a disastrous decision. Then Enki must quietly repair the arrangement while allowing everyone to preserve a little pride. His wisdom is practical rather than distant. He understands irrigation, brickmaking, weaving, metalwork, music, writing, and ritual procedure. These skills shape civilization through patient labor. They require measurement, memory, and attention to materials. A wall collapses when proportions are wrong. A canal fails when its slope is misjudged. A hymn loses power when words are misplaced. Enki stands behind the knowledge that keeps such systems functioning. Sumerian compositions describe divine powers sometimes called the ordinances of civilization. They include kingship, priestly offices, craftsmanship, music, judgment, sexuality, warfare, and social customs. These powers are not presented as abstract ideas. They behave almost like sacred properties that can be held, transferred, guarded, or misused. One famous narrative places many of them under Enki's authority. The goddess Inanna visits him, receives numerous powers during a feast, and carries them toward her own city. Enki later regrets his generosity and attempts to recover them, with limited success. The story may sound playful, but its structure reveals something serious. Civilization is shown as a collection of specialized forces rather than one simple achievement. Order depends upon many roles working together, even when those roles create conflict. Scholars connected with Oxford and Yale have treated such compositions as reflections of ancient Mesopotamian social thought. The texts do not provide administrative manuals, yet they show how people imagined institutions as gifts, carrying divine weight. A priesthood was therefore more than a profession. It participated in powers believed to originate among the gods. You pause beside a carved vessel where two streams descend between curling plants. The surface feels cold beneath your fingertips. Light from an oil lamp trembles across the image, making the water appear to move. Enki's symbols often join fertility with mystery. The goatfish, a creature combining the forequarters of a goat with the tail of a fish, became closely associated with him. It joins dry land and water within one body, creating a being that belongs fully to neither realm. The image seems strange because it is meant to cross boundaries. Enki himself moves between opposites. He connects divine and human knowledge, deep water and cultivated land, secrecy and revelation, danger and protection. He also governs ritual magic. This does not mean theatrical sorcery performed for entertainment. Mesopotamian magic involved spoken formulas, purified materials, symbolic actions, and precise timing. It addressed illness, curses, nightmares, pollution, hostile spirits, and disruption believed to threaten ordinary life, Enki possessed the knowledge required to identify such disturbances. His son Asa-Luhi often appears as a divine ritual expert who reports a problem to him. Enki then explains the remedy, naming substances, gestures, and words that restore balance. The structure resembles consultation between a younger specialist and an experienced master. A crisis is observed, its signs are described, the correct procedure is revealed. Order returns through knowledge carefully applied. That pattern may preserve something of priestly training. A novice encounters symptoms he cannot interpret. A senior priest teaches him which tradition should be used. The divine conversation mirrors human instruction while granting sacred authority to the remedies. A scholarly debate remains open concerning how literally ancient worshippers understood these rituals. Some historians emphasize deep belief in supernatural forces. Others note that ritual healing could also provide social reassurance, emotional structure, and practical care. The two explanations need not exclude each other. A patient might receive herbs, washing, rest, spoken comfort, and symbolic protection within the same ceremony. The ritual addressed body, fear, family, and divine order together. Modern categories separate medicine, religion, and psychology. Ancient practice often allowed them to remain intertwined. Enki's association with creation follows the same practical character. He does not merely speak the world into existence from a remote height. He shapes, organizes, assigns duties, and corrects mistakes. Humanity often appears within these stories as a solution to divine labor. The gods require food, temples, canals, and offerings. Work becomes exhausting. Humans are formed to take responsibility for tasks that sustain the cosmic household. This explanation may sound unflattering, although ancient listeners probably recognized a familiar truth. Every institution eventually invents assistance, yet the tradition also grants humanity a special connection with divine intelligence. People may serve the gods, but they also receive crafts, language, ritual, and social order. They become capable of maintaining a world shaped by sacred knowledge. A quirky modern theory presents Enki as a visitor from another planet who engineered humanity through advanced science. Supporters point toward creation stories and strange divine images. Archaeologists and historians find no reliable evidence for this interpretation, which depends upon reading ancient metaphors as technical reports. Still, the popularity of the idea reveals something enduring about Enki. He feels different from a distant thunder god. His stories concern knowledge hidden behind appearances, designs concealed within life, and secrets passed selectively to humanity. Perhaps that is why he remains so compelling. He offers the possibility that the world possesses an underlying structure, even when its surface appears chaotic. Water moves beneath dry ground. Knowledge waits beneath confusion. A solution exists somewhere, provided the correct question is asked. You hear droplets falling into a basin. Each sound returns from the walls with a softer echo. The darkness no longer feels empty. It feels occupied by processes too slow and deep for ordinary sight. Enki's priesthood serves within that atmosphere. Its members approach a god who reveals without revealing everything. They preserve words that heal, formulas that purify, and stories explaining why civilization remains fragile. Their authority rests upon access to hidden order. The lamp flame bends briefly. Although no door has opened, water continues moving beneath the floor, carrying no message that human ears can clearly understand. Perhaps wisdom begins there, in the acceptance that the deepest source remains unseen. A bronze bowl rests between your hands, cool at first, then slowly warmed by your skin. Its rim carries a thin line of mineral residue. The water inside appears perfectly still, although faint ripples answer every breath. You stand within the sacred precinct as dawn begins whitening the upper walls. The courtyard remains empty, except for attendants moving through narrow doorways with measured steps. Their garments are plain, their heads carefully prepared, and their hands occupied with vessels, cloths, baskets, and sealed jars. Nothing here feels accidental. Enki's priesthood was not one single office held by identical servants. Mesopotamian temples depended upon many specialists, each responsible for a particular part of divine service. Some managed property and workers, others prepared food, guarded storerooms, performed music, interpreted omens, or conducted purification. The surviving titles belong mostly to later written periods, when administration had become remarkably detailed. Records from temple archives confirm that sacred households employed large numbers of people. Their duties could include brewing, milling, fishing, gardening, weaving, accounting, and maintaining canals connected with temple estates. Within this complicated institution, ritual authority remained carefully divided. A person who handled grain did not automatically enter the innermost sanctuary. A skilled musician could shape a ceremony without touching the sacred image. Access depended upon moon status, purity, training, and inherited custom. You feel this hierarchy through architecture. Each doorway narrows the world around you. Open courtyards give way to smaller rooms where light enters reluctantly. Storage areas hold offerings and equipment, while private chambers protect objects hidden from ordinary visitors. The attendants nearest Enki's presence carried a special burden. They served a god associated with purity, wisdom, and the concealed freshwater deep. Their work required more than clean hands. They had to maintain an environment where divine order could remain undisturbed. Water stood at the center of that task. A priest pours a narrow stream into a stone basin. The sound is gentle, almost domestic, yet everyone nearby becomes still. Water used in ritual could not always be drawn casually from the nearest channel. Its source, container, timing, and handling might determine whether it was suitable. Later incantation traditions describe purified water as carrying the authority of Enki. Priests used it to cleanse people, rooms, statues, tools, and thresholds. The liquid was ordinary in substance, but sacred procedure transformed its role. It became a visible carrier of invisible order. The University of Chicago's studies of Mesopotamian ritual texts have shown how carefully purification was structured. Water could be combined with plants, minerals, oils, or specially prepared substances. Spoken formulas accompanied physical actions, joining material cleansing with divine command. The priest did not merely wash away dirt, he removed a condition believed to interfere with proper relationships between humans, gods, and places. Pollution might arise from illness, contact with death, broken taboos, hostile magic, or actions whose consequences remained uncertain. Uncertainty itself could be dangerous. A worshipper might not know which offence had disturbed the balance. A priest therefore approached the problem through inherited procedures. He identified signs, selected words, prepared materials, and guided the person through a controlled return to safety. You hear the soft brushing of tamarisk branches against damp skin. Drops fall onto the floor and darken the clay. Incense follows, carrying a warm scent through the chamber. The combination of water, fragrance, movement, and speech turns purification into a complete sensory experience. Such ceremonies also strengthened priestly authority. The specialist knew which water was acceptable, which vessel belonged to each act, and which formula must be spoken. Knowledge remained valuable because it was precise, guarded, and difficult to replace. Temple learning often passed through families or professional lineages. A senior practitioner trained younger relatives or selected students through repetition and correction. Tablets supported memory during later periods. But oral instruction remained essential. Gesture, tone, timing, and physical preparation could not be captured fully by written signs. A novice might spend years learning what appears to be a simple sequence. He must know where to stand, how to hold a vessel, when to face the sacred image, and when to remain silent. One careless movement could seem disrespectful or ritually ineffective. This was serious work. Though it surely contained ordinary human moments, a jar could slip, a lamp could smoke badly. Someone might forget a cloth and receive the ancient equivalent of a deeply disappointed stare. The institution survived because priests were human enough to correct mistakes, yet disciplined enough to conceal disorder from worshippers. Temple service required calm surfaces. Behind those surfaces stood preparation, argument, fatigue, and constant maintenance. Enki's attendants also guarded knowledge concerning the sacred precinct itself. They understood which rooms required cleansing, which days allowed particular rites, and which objects could cross certain thresholds. The temple functioned through invisible boundaries as much as visible walls. A locked door protected valuable property. A forbidden doorway protected divine distance. That distinction shaped the behaviour of everyone entering the sanctuary. Visitors brought offerings and petitions, but most did not approach the god directly. Priests received gifts, conveyed prayers, and interpreted the proper response. They stood between ordinary life and divine presence. Scholars at Oxford and Yale have debated whether this mediation primarily served religious necessity or institutional control. Some emphasize genuine fear of divine pollution and sacred danger. Others examine how restricted access strengthened temple authority and protected economic privilege. Both forces may have worked together. Belief does not become false simply because it supports an institution. Institutions do not become harmless simply because their members believe sincerely. The temple could inspire devotion while also controlling resources, labour, and knowledge. You pass a storeroom filled with sealed vessels. Clay stoppers bear impressions identifying contents or responsible officials. Oil, grain, beer, wool, and precious materials move through the temple under careful supervision. Sacred order and accounting site surprisingly close together. This closeness reflects Enki's own character. Wisdom was not separated from management. The same divine intelligence that governed incantations also governed crafts, measurements, canals, and organised work. His priesthood therefore protected both ritual purity and practical order. A poorly maintained canal could endanger fields. A poorly maintained ceremony could endanger the city's relationship with its god. Both failures resulted from neglect, and both demanded skilled correction. One unusual tradition describes certain priests wearing garments made to resemble fish. Later images show sages covered with fish-like cloaks, their human faces visible beneath open jaws. Some fringe writers imagine secret amphibious orders serving Enki beside the marshes. No reliable evidence proves such a priestly brotherhood at early Eridu. The fish costume more likely expressed symbolic closeness to wisdom emerging from water. Yet the image captures the atmosphere surrounding Enki's servants, who seem to stand between human settlement and hidden depths. Their power came partly from controlled ambiguity. They knew things others did not know. They entered places others could not enter. They handled materials that changed meaning once placed within ritual sequence. Still, their days were probably less mysterious than later imagination suggests. They inspected supplies, supervised workers, cleaned rooms, prepared offerings, and resolved practical problems. Sacred knowledge lived inside routine rather than apart from it. The bowl in your hands has grown warmer. A priest reaches forward and takes it without speaking. He carries it toward a doorway covered by the woven cloth, where the air becomes cooler and the light turns faintly blue. You remain outside, beyond the curtain. Water touches stone. A low voice begins speaking words preserved through generations of careful teaching. You cannot hear every phrase, and perhaps you were never meant to hear them. The priesthood guards more than a secret. It guards the fragile belief that order can be restored, provided someone still remembers how. The sky remains black when a wooden latch lifts inside Enki's temple. Cold air enters through the doorway, carrying marsh mist and the faint scent of sleeping reeds. No bird has called yet. No cooking fire burns among the nearby houses. Even the canals appear motionless beneath the stars. A single attendant steps across the threshold. He carries a small lamp protected by his palm. Its flame stains the plaster with amber light, revealing baskets, low benches, and painted vessels. His sandals make almost no sound upon the swept floor. He has entered before the ordinary world awakens, because the divine household must awaken first. You follow at a respectful distance. The temple feels different at this hour, neither abandoned nor fully alive. Darkness softens every corner, familiar objects become uncertain shapes, and each doorway resembles an opening into deeper night. The attendant pauses beside a shallow brazier. He places dry reeds upon old embers, then bends close and breathes carefully. A red point appears beneath the ash. Smoke rises in a narrow thread, carrying yesterday's fragrance from the room. Another servant enters with folded linen. A third brings a covered basket containing fresh bread. They exchange no greeting. Their silence is not unfriendly. Speech simply waits until the sacred order has been restored. The first duty is separation. Night belongs to dreams, wandering spirits, and uncertain boundaries. Morning must be distinguished from that dangerous interval through controlled action. Doors are opened in the proper sequence. Lamps are trimmed, floors are examined for insects, dust, moisture, or any sign of disturbance. A priest stands near the inner chamber and listens. He hears the distant splash of a fish beyond the walls. He hears a jar settling against its wooden support. He hears his own breathing inside the quiet room. Nothing suggests intrusion, yet caution remains part of reverence. Temple records from later Mesopotamian cities show that divine service followed daily schedules. Meals, music, clothing, and formal appearances occurred at appointed moments. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania have described these sanctuaries as functioning like great households. Although their principal resident was a god, the oldest ceremonies Eridu remain unwritten. Their precise order cannot be recovered. But later customs suggest how carefully dawn may have been prepared. A god did not simply receive visitors whenever someone felt unusually spiritual. The divine residents operated according to inherited discipline. You smell crushed juniper as an attendant opens a sealed container. A few pieces are placed upon the warming brazier. Their fragrance spreads slowly, dry and resinous, pushing away the stale breath of darkness. Smoke touches the ceiling. The priest raises both hands, not dramatically, but with the calm accuracy of long practice. He speaks a short formula toward the inner doorway. His voice remains low enough that the words seem intended for the room itself. Perhaps he announces the return of light. Perhaps he asks permission to enter. Perhaps he identifies himself by office and purity. The words have vanished, leaving only the likely need for words. A curtain is drawn aside. Beyond it rests the most restricted chamber, where Enki's presence is represented through a sacred image, emblem, or carefully arranged seat. The earliest form is uncertain. Archaeology cannot tell whether a statue stood within every phase of the sanctuary, and scholars remain divided on when fully developed image rituals became established. Some historians argue that simple cult symbols preceded human-shaped divine statues. Others suggest that perishable images may have disappeared without leaving evidence. Wood, cloth, paint, and woven reeds rarely survive the damp soil of southern Mesopotamia. The absence is frustrating, though rather appropriate. A god of hidden wisdom leaves historians debating an empty room. The priest enters carrying a lamp. He checks the sacred space for signs of disorder. Dust is removed with a soft cloth. A stool is straightened. a vessel is placed upon its marked position. Every action confirms that the divine household remains stable. You notice how awakening does not mean shaking a statue or calling loudly. It means preparing conditions in which presence can be recognized. Light replaces darkness, fragrance replaces stale air, fresh food replaces emptiness, ordered sound replaces silence. The transformation is gradual. Outside, the eastern horizon begins to pale. A watchman upon the outer platform sees the first change in the sky. He gives a quiet signal, perhaps by tapping wood or speaking through the doorway. Inside, the servants respond. A covered basin is uncovered. Fresh cloth is arranged nearby. The priest performs a cleansing gesture, then approaches the sacred place. His hands move slowly because haste would suggest carelessness, and carelessness could suggest insult. The bread basket is opened. Warm grain fragrance rises from small loaves baked during the final darkness. A cup of beer or another prepared drink may accompany them. Dates, fish, onions, or oil could be presented according to season and custom. These foods are not yet an ordinary meal. Their placement changes their status. They become provisions for the god, offered within a sequence that recognizes divine ownership before human consumption. Later administrative tablets confirm that temple offerings could be distributed among priests and workers after presentation. This practical arrangement has sometimes encouraged modern suspicion that ceremonies merely disguised elite feasting. Such explanations overlook how sacred economies usually combine belief, obligation, and redistribution. A loaf may nourish a priest while still carrying ritual meaning. Human appetite and religious devotion have rarely occupied separate buildings. The morning rite also renews time. Yesterday's offerings are removed, yesterday's ash is cleared, and yesterday's darkness is dismissed. The sanctuary becomes ready for another cycle of petitions, judgments, deliveries, and ceremonies. A singer waits near the outer room. She does not begin until the priest gives a signal. Her first note is soft, almost level with the crackling brazier. It lengthens through the chamber, steady and unhurried. The melody may praise Enki as provider of sweet water and wise counsel. It may identify Eridu as his chosen dwelling. Repetition allows the words to settle into memory, while measured rhythm protects them from careless alteration. One curious tradition claims that certain morning hymns could calm the heart of a deity who had experienced troubling dreams. Gods in Mesopotamian literature sometimes slept, ate, worried, and became irritated with a remarkable familiarity. Priests therefore treated divine mood as a matter of public concern. The idea appears strange, yet its logic is clear. If the city depends upon divine favour, then the god must begin the day peacefully. A disturbed deity could mean disturbed waters, uncertain omens, or decisions nobody wished to explain. Scholars continue debating whether daily image care was understood literally or symbolically. Did worshippers believe the god physically consumed the meal and inhabited the statue? Did they regard the ritual as ceremonial language expressing dependence and loyalties? Ancient practice may not fit either modern category. Presence could be real without being physical in an ordinary sense. The image could become divine during ritual while remaining crafted material. Contradiction did not necessarily trouble worshippers as much as it troubles modern definitions. The singer's voice rises slightly as dawn reaches the upper wall. Pale light enters through a narrow opening and falls across the floor. It touches the offering table, then moves toward the inner chamber with almost deliberate slowness. For a moment, everyone remains still. The temple has awakened. Outside, a heron calls across the marsh. Roof doors open among the houses, and smoke begins climbing into the brightening sky. Potters uncover their clay. Fishers loosen boats from reed posts. Farmers walk towards canals carrying tools upon their shoulders. Their day begins beneath a sacred order already renewed. You stand near the doorway while sunlight warms the threshold. The attendants now speak quietly. discussing supplies and duties. The severe silence loosens without disappearing completely. Behind the curtain, the lamp continues burning beside Enki's place. Bread rests upon the table. Fragrant smoke circles upward and fades into the rafters. Morning has entered the world through careful hands. A clay jar presses against the priest's shoulder as he walks beneath a moonless sky. The vessel is heavy, and every step must remain steady. Water moves inside with a low, hollow sound, like breath caught within the earth. You follow along a narrow path between sleeping houses. Reed fences lean toward the lane, and cold mud clings to your sandals. No lamps burn nearby. The priesthood prefers darkness for this journey, because sacred water must arrive before ordinary hands disturb its source. 2 attendants walk beside the carrier. One holds a covered lamp, while the other carries a bundle of tamarisk, wool, and fragrant wood. Their silence protects the purpose of the procession. Even the vessel's soft sloshing seems unusually loud. The destination lies beyond the busiest canals, near a place where groundwater rises cleanly through prepared earth. It may be a well, a spring, or a carefully protected basin connected with the deeper waters beneath Eridu. The precise source changes with landscape and period, yet the principle remains constant. Not every water is equal. Canal water carries silt, fish scales, footprints, and the residue of daily work. Marsh water mingles with decaying plants and salt. Sacred cleansing requires water imagined as closer to the hidden freshwater deep, untouched by ordinary confusion. The priest kneels beside the source. He washes his hands without placing them directly inside the collection basin. An attendant pours water over his fingers, allowing it to fall aside. Purity must begin with the person who handles the vessel. A cloth seal is removed from the jar. The opening remains narrow, reducing dust and careless contact. Water enters through a smaller cup, one measured pouring at a time. Each movement follows a remembered order. The procedure feels slow because slowness proves attention. Later Mesopotamian ritual texts studied by scholars at Yale University describe water drawn under controlled conditions and empowered through spoken formulas. The liquid could be purified through contact with plants, minerals, incense, or sacred objects. Its effectiveness depended upon preparation rather than quantity. A single bowl might protect a doorway. A few drops could cleanse a person's hands, forehead, clothing, or tools. The water did not need to flood the room, it needed to enter the correct sequence. You smell damp clay as the jar fills. The priest touches its rim with a sprig, then speaks toward the dark surface. His words identify the water with Enki's hidden domain and separate it from common use. The transformation cannot be seen. The water remains clear, cool, and ordinary to your eyes. Yet within the priestly imagination, it now carries a different authority. It belongs temporarily to the world beneath the world, where contamination has not yet entered. The jar is sealed again. A cord passes around its neck. A lump of clay closes the knot. The mark impressed upon that clay identifies responsibility. If the seal breaks, the journey loses certainty. Temple administration and ritual discipline meet upon that tiny surface. Sacred trust requires evidence, because priests understood that humans could be careless, curious, or impressively thirsty. The procession turns toward the sanctuary, and the covered lamp reveals only a small circle of ground. Beyond it, the plain disappears into darkness, while stars gather above the silent marsh. A distant animal splashes among the reeds. One attendant pauses, listening for footsteps. Sacred water must reach the temple without interruption. Argument or accidental contact with anyone considered unclean. This concern was not simply about dirt. Mesopotamian purity involved invisible conditions produced by illness, death, broken boundaries, hostile forces, or uncertain divine displeasure. a person could appear physically clean while remaining ritually dangerous. The water offered a controlled return inside the temple gate. A waiting servant receives the jar without touching the carrier's hands. The seal is examined under lamplight. Its impression remains unbroken, and the vessel passes into a chamber reserved for preparation. There, shallow bowls stand upon a low bench. Some are made from clay, while others use stone, metal, or shell. Their materials may reflect rank, purpose, or availability. A vessel used for washing sacred equipment would not necessarily serve a sick petitioner. The shape matters as much as the contents. Narrow jars preserve water. Wide basins expose it for blessing. Small cups guide a measured pouring. Spouted vessels direct a clean stream without requiring the priest to dip his fingers inside. Archaeological collections from southern Mesopotamia contain many vessels whose exact ritual purpose remains uncertain. Some may have served kitchens, storerooms, workshops, or shrines. Scholars debate how confidently form can reveal function when objects appear without written instructions. A beautifully shaped bowl is not automatically sacred. An ordinary cup can become sacred through use. Context provides clues, but the ancient hand that lifted it remains absent. The priest opens the jar and pours water into a stone basin. Tamarisk leaves touch the surface, followed by a thread of clean wool. Fragrant smoke passes above the bowl, creating a thin veil between flame and water. He speaks the names of protective powers. His voice remains calm, almost conversational, as though order responds better to certainty than volume. The attendants answer with brief, repeated phrases. The ritual may cleanse more than a body. Doorposts receive drops, floor corners are sprinkled, statues, tools, beds, garments, an offering, tables can all require purification. Every object participating in sacred service must be brought into proper relation. You watch an attendant carry a smaller cup along the inner wall. He touches each threshold with another damp branch, beginning low and moving upward. The gesture closes invisible openings through which disorder might enter. One fringe interpretation claims that these sprinkling rites preserve memories of ancient flood survival. When clean water became a symbol of protection from contaminated marshes, the suggestion is imaginative. Though no direct evidence connects every purification ceremony with one prehistoric disaster, more cautious historians see water symbolism emerging from daily experience. Clean water preserved health, sustained crops, and distinguished life from desolation. Its sacred meaning needed no single catastrophe. Still, the people of Eridu knew that water could save and destroy. A canal nourished barley until its banks failed. A marsh fed families while hiding fever and dangerous animals. A flood renewed soil, then carried away houses. Purification therefore did not celebrate water as harmless. It placed dangerous power under ritual control. The priest approaches a petitioner seated near the chamber entrance. The man has suffered troubling dreams and refuses to enter his home. He believes something followed him from a neglected burial place. No wound appears upon his body. His fear is real. The priest washes the man's hands, touches water to his forehead, and circles him with smoke. A small clay object representing the disturbance is placed beside the basin. Spoken words transfer danger away from the living person. The object is later removed, broken, buried, or carried beyond the settlement boundary. Water begins the separation, while disposal completes it. Purification works through movement, taking disorder from one place and directing it toward another. The process offers emotional structure as well as sacred protection. Fear receives a name, a sequence, and an ending. The petitioner knows when to sit, when to rise, and when he may safely return home. Modern scholars continue discussing whether such rites should be understood as religion, medicine, psychology, or social care. Ancient priests would likely find the categories unnecessarily narrow. The ceremony treats the whole disturbance at once. Near dawn, the remaining water is divided among sealed containers. None will be wasted casually, some waits for another cleansing. Some may be poured into a protected place where sacred substances can return respectfully to the earth. The large jar stands empty beside the wall. Its journey has ended, but the priestly duty continues through every drop now resting within smaller vessels. You hear the first bird stirring outside. The hidden water has entered the temple without spectacle, carried through darkness by disciplined hands. Its power lies not in mystery alone, but in the belief that disorder can be washed, redirected, and quietly released. The broken tablet lies beneath a scholar's lamp, its edges pale where ancient clay has recently fractured. Lines of wedge-shaped writing cross the surviving surface, then vanish abruptly into empty space. One phrase praises a divine dwelling, another names flowing water. The rest has been swallowed by damage, distance, and time. You lean closer, searching for the missing voice. A hymn is more than words arranged upon clay. It requires breath, timing, memory, and human presence. The tablet preserves only part of that living structure. It cannot show whether a singer whispered, chanted, or lifted the final syllable toward the ceiling. Even a complete text would remain incomplete. Sumerian scribes wrote literary compositions upon clay tablets using signs pressed with a reed stylus. Many surviving hymns come from copies made during the early 2nd millennium, before the Common Era. Students reproduced respected works in scribal schools, sometimes carefully and sometimes with charming evidence of fatigue. Their exercises preserved compositions that might otherwise have disappeared. Yet school tablets also complicate the search for temple performance. A copied hymn may reflect genuine worship, formal education, literary admiration, or several purposes joined together. You imagine a young scribe seated on a woven mat. Damp clay rests across his knees while a teacher recites a line slowly. The student presses each sign, hesitates, then corrects a crooked wedge with his thumb. Outside, merchants argue over grain. Inside, divine poetry receives imperfect spelling. The words praise temples as mountains, gardens, radiant houses, and places where heaven touches the earth. Buildings become living beings through poetic language, stores speak, foundations shine, and walls inspire fear like powerful animals. Enki's sanctuary at Eridu appears within this world of sacred description. It is presented as a place rooted in the freshwater deep, filled with abundance and divine intelligence. The hymn does not function like an architectural survey. It transforms mud brick rooms into a cosmic residence. Such language may have been sung during festivals, dedications, royal ceremonies, or regular temple service. It may also have circulated among trained scribes who valued its formal beauty. The surviving copies rarely explain precisely where every composition belonged. This uncertainty remains an open scholarly debate. Some historians regard many hymns as records of actual liturgical performance. Others see literary works created for courts and schools, even when they borrow the language of worship. The distinction matters because a poem about ritual is not necessarily a ritual text. A modern song describing a wedding does not automatically reveal the ceremony's complete order. Ancient compositions require the same caution. A clay tablet preserved by the British Museum contains a Sumerian hymn to Enki, joined with prayers for King Ur-Ninurta. Its survival proves that praise of Enki could be connected with royal hopes and public authority. The king enters the composition as a petitioner who depends upon divine favour. The text belongs to a world far removed from Eridu's earliest sanctuary, yet its phrases may preserve older images carried through generations of performance. Water, wisdom, abundance, and sacred residents continue to gather around Enki with remarkable persistence. You hear a singer testing a low note in a shadowed hall, Her voice passes beneath wooden beams and returns from plastered walls. Another singer answers from the opposite side, perhaps repeating a final phrase. No notation explains the melody. Mesopotamian tablets occasionally preserve technical terms connected with music, instruments, and tuning. Some compositions include repeated lines or structural markers that may have guided performers. However, most hymns offer no dependable map of pitch, tempo, or vocal arrangement. A refrain might indicate a chorus, it might signal repetition by one singer, it might simply organize the written composition for memory and teaching. Each possibility changes the sound you imagine. Priests and musicians probably knew conventions that needed no written explanation. A brief heading could summon an entire pattern of melody and movement. The tablet served trained memory rather than replacing it. This resembles a recipe that lists ingredients but assumes the cook understands fire. Much knowledge remains outside the written surface because everyone involved already knows it. Unfortunately, everyone involved has been gone for thousands of years. The damaged edges deepen the problem. Tablets break along lines, removing verbs, names, and ritual instructions. One fragment may preserve the opening, while another holds several lines from the middle. Pieces from the same composition can rest in separate museums without being recognized as companions. Scholars compare handwriting, clay, wording, and line order to join these scattered witnesses. A newly identified fragment can restore a missing passage, alter a translation, or reveal that an accepted reconstruction was mistaken. The work resembles listening through walls. One tablet praises Enki's house as a place where destiny is determined. Another composition describes divine speech spreading order across distant lands. Similar phrases may belong to shared poetic tradition, rather than one fixed ceremony. Singers likely adapted inherited language to different occasions. A royal prayer could attach itself to a familiar hymn. A local temple might replace one divine name with another. A festival performance could expand through repeated praise that scribes later shortened. Oral tradition allows flexibility, while writing encourages stability. Liturgical practice probably lived between those forces. Priests preserved sacred wording, yet performers responded to audience, season, ruler, and setting. A quirky theory suggests that repeated sign groups conceal a forgotten system of musical notation. Supporters search for numerical arrangements, balanced lines, and recurring marks that might indicate rhythm. Most specialists remain unconvinced because the patterns can arise through grammar, poetry, or scribal layout. Still, the possibility is tempting. You want the silence to contain a code. You want one patient arrangement of wedges to release an ancient melody into the room. The clay refuses such generosity. What survives more clearly is structure. Hymns often build through repeated titles, descriptions, and appeals. A god is named through several qualities, each phrase adding weight. The city, temple, ruler, and natural world become linked through carefully ordered praise. This pattern would have suited performance. Repetition allows listeners to enter the words slowly. Familiar phrases create expectation, while small changes keep attention from drifting completely into sleep. A lead singer may have delivered longer lines. A gathered group may have answered with a fixed response. Instruments could mark transitions, though the exact arrangement remains uncertain. The priesthood did not need every worshipper to understand every phrase. Ancient sacred language often gains authority through form, sound, and repetition. Meaning enters through atmosphere as much as explanation. You stand within an imagined hall as voices gather around Enki's name. The first line moves slowly, carried by one singer. A response follows, softer and lower, then disappears beneath the next verse. The words describe water entering fields, wisdom entering councils, and an order entering troubled hearts. Each image unfolds gently, giving the listeners time to breathe beside it. The hymn becomes a path through divine qualities rather than a statement requiring immediate analysis. Then the tablet breaks. The final surviving sign stands alone near the damaged edge. It may begin a verb, a title, or a name. Nothing beyond it remains certain. You can reconstruct grammar, you can compare parallel texts, you can study every surviving fragment beneath careful light. Yet the vanished response, the lifted hand, and the final fading note remain beyond recovery. Perhaps the forgotten liturgy survives most honestly within that absence, not as a secret waiting to be solved, but as a silence shaped by the words around it. Warm bread leaves the temple oven while darkness still clings to the eastern sky. Steam rises from split loaves, carrying the scent of barley, ash, and toasted grain. Nearby, a brewer lifts a clay lid and studies the surface of a thick, fermenting drink. You stand within a courtyard where sacred service resembles a household preparing for honoured guests. Yet the guest is unseen, and his needs are treated with greater care than those of any mortal ruler. Every basket, jar, and bowl enters through hands trained to recognise weight, freshness, and proper condition. The food must be worthy. A miller kneels beside a heavy grinding stone. Her arms move with practised rhythm, crushing grain into coarse flour. Fine dust settles upon her hair and shoulders, whitening them beneath the lamplight. She works without ceremony, although her labour supports ceremony at every stage. Other workers sift flour through woven screens. Bakers mix it with water, oil, dates, or fragrant seeds. Some loaves remain plain, while others are shaped for special occasions. Their forms may indicate purpose, rank, or the quantity assigned to a particular table. Temple archives from Mesopotamia confirm that divine households received regular allocations of grain, beer, oil, meat, fish, fruit, and vegetables. Scholars at the University of Chicago have shown how these offerings depended upon large networks of fields, herds, workshops, and labourers. The sanctuary table therefore begins far beyond the sanctuary walls. A farmer cuts barley beside an irrigation channel. A shepherd counts animals returning through dust. A fisherman untangles silver bodies from a net at sunrise. Their work eventually enters the temple as measured produce. Carried in baskets and recorded by officials, nothing simply appears upon Enki's table. The temple controls land, storage rooms, boats, animals, and skilled workers. Supervisors inspect deliveries. While scribes press marks into clay, they record quantities, responsible households, and destinations. Sacred generosity requires excellent bookkeeping, which is perhaps less poetic but considerably more reliable. You hear grain pouring into a storage jar. The sound resembles dry rain. A clerk watches carefully, then seals the vessel with clay impressed by an official stamp. The seal protects both food and reputation. If the jar arrives light, someone must explain the missing portion. Divine property may invite reverence, though it can also invite very human creativity. Inside the kitchen, cooks prepare different foods according to season and ritual need. Fish may be cleaned, salted, roasted, or simmered with herbs. Onions and leeks provide strong flavour. Dates sweeten cakes, sauces, and drinks. Oil glistens upon shallow bowls. Beer rests in tall jars, filtered through reeds when served. The drink is nourishing, mildly intoxicating, and safer than many open water sources. It belongs to daily life, wages, hospitality, and sacred presentation. Enki's connection with abundance makes the meal especially meaningful. His hidden waters sustain grain, gardens, animals, and human bodies. Offering food to him returns part of that abundance to its imagined source. The act creates a circle. Water nourishes barley. Barley becomes bread and beer. Workers carry both into the temple. Priests present them to the god whose waters made their growth possible. This exchange does not resemble payment between equals. Humans cannot repay a divine power completely. They acknowledge dependence through gifts, hoping the relationship remains generous and orderly. A servant wipes the offering table with a clean cloth. He places bread in measured rows, arranging each loaf with its best surface facing inward. Small dishes of dates, herbs, and cooked fish follow. The presentation matters. Food given carelessly might suggest contempt. Food arranged beautifully expresses attention, hierarchy, and control. The meal becomes a visible statement that the divine household is stable. A priest approaches wearing freshly prepared garments. He examines each dish without touching it. Another attendant checks that no insect, hair, a cracked vessel, or accidental stain has disturbed the arrangement. Perfection is impossible, but ritual requires its pursuit. The inner chamber grows fragrant with warm grain and scented oil. Lamps brighten the walls. A curtain closes, separating the divine meal from ordinary sight. What happens behind that curtain remains uncertain. Some later texts describe gods eating and drinking like members of a royal court. Myths picture them gathering around feasts, becoming joyful, angry, or unwise through drink. Temple ritual may have treated the sacred image as the point where divine presence received nourishment. Yet nobody expected teeth marks in the bread. Scholars continue debating how Vijit worshippers understood the divine consumption. Some argue that the god received the food's invisible essence, while priests later consumed its material form. Others suggest the presentation itself created honor, regardless of any imagined physical eating. Ancient categories may have allowed both ideas to coexist. The god could receive a meal without consuming it as a human body would. Presence, fragrance, intention, and ritual ownership may have mattered more than disappearance. You wait outside the closed chamber. No voices emerge. The silence allows the meal to belong fully to Enki for a measured interval. This pause transforms food into offering. When the doors reopen, attendants remove the dishes in proper order. The bread remains whole, the beer jars remain heavy, yet the meal is no longer ordinary property. Portions pass to priests, musicians, guards, administrators, and workers entitled to temple rations. Some may support dependents, widows, or labor crews. Sacred food returns to human society through an ordered system of distribution. Researchers at Yale University have examined ration lists showing how grain and oil could support large institutional populations. These records reveal differences in status, gender, age, and occupation. A temple meal therefore reflects both religious devotion and social hierarchy. The highest officials may receive preferred cuts or richer portions. Labourers receive measured staples. Children and dependents receive smaller amounts. The god's table becomes a centre from which privilege and survival both flow. This system could protect vulnerable people during shortage. It could also strengthen institutional control over those who depended upon rations. The same jar of grain could represent security, obligation, and power. A curious tradition claims that food offered to a god could absorb divine blessing and carry protection to those who ate it. Direct evidence for one universal belief is lacking. Those sacred leftovers often held special status across ancient cultures. More speculative writers imagine priests secretly using rare herbs or intoxicating substances during Enki's feasts. They suggest that altered states inspired visions of the watery deep. Archaeological evidence does not support such elaborate claims for Eridu's regular offerings. The known ingredients are interesting enough: fermented drink, incense, darkness, music, fasting, and expectation can shape perception without requiring a hidden potion. Human minds are already remarkably cooperative with the ritual atmosphere. In a side courtyard, bones and fish remains gathered for disposal. Not every fragment can return to ordinary rubbish. Materials connected with sacred service may require burial, burning, or placement in designated areas. Archaeologists often study such deposits to reconstruct temple diets. Fish bones reveal species and seasons. Animal remains suggest age, butchery, and preferred cuts. Charred grain shows what was stored, cooked, or accidentally burned. Prestigious research laboratories use microscopic analysis to identify oils, plants, and residues inside ancient vessels. The results sometimes confirm familiar foods, while occasionally revealing ingredients invisible to the naked eye. Still, chemistry cannot recover etiquette. It cannot show who carried the first bowl, who tasted the sauce, or who worried that the bread had risen poorly. It cannot reveal whether a priest quietly complained about repeated fish while maintaining a face of perfect devotion. You watch the final portions leave the kitchen. Workers scrape mixing bowls, sweep flour, and stack empty baskets. The ovens cool slowly, releasing stored heat into the courtyard. Beyond the walls, fields shimmer beneath afternoon light. Boats move along canals carrying fresh supplies toward the temple stores. The divine household consumes nothing visibly, yet an entire economy gathers around its table. This is the mystery of sacred feeding. The meal nourishes the god through honor, the temple through wealth, and the population through distribution. It binds farmers, cooks, scribes, priests, and laborers into one system of obligation. Enki remains unseen, but his table is never empty. A strip of blue wool lies across the priest's open palm. Beside it rests a polished stone, a reed wand, and a small clay figure. None appears remarkable alone, together, arranged in silence. They form a sentence without ordinary words. You stand near a low table while the priest prepares the rite. His fingers move with deliberate calm. He places the stone toward the east, turns the clay figure toward the doorway, and knots the wool 3 times. Every position carries meaning. The temple's secret language is not spoken through the mouth alone. It exists within gestures, materials, colours, directions, numbers, and carefully timed movements. A trained observer understands how these elements combine. An untrained visitor sees only objects being moved around a room. That difference protects priestly knowledge. Mesopotamian ritual texts often list ingredients and actions with remarkable precision. They describe plants to gather, threads to twist, figures to shape, and words to repeat. Research from the University of Pennsylvania confirms that many instructions were written for specialists already familiar with their wider ceremonial context. A tablet might command the priest to lift a vessel 3 times. It may not explain why 3 matters, how high the vessel rises, or where his eyes should rest. Such details belong to living instruction. The written line serves as a reminder. The teacher supplies the rest. You watch the priest draw a circle upon the floor using flour. His hand does not hurry. The circle separates a protected space from the surrounding room, creating a boundary that exists through shared belief. Inside it, ordinary rules weaken. A small figurine may represent illness, misfortune, an enemy, or a dangerous spirit. Its identity depends upon the words spoken over it. Clay has no fixed meaning until ritual assigns one. The priest touches the figure's head, chest, and feet. Contact identifies the entire body through selected points. He then turns the figure away from the petitioner, directing its influence outward. Movement becomes grammar. Turning inward can invite, turning outward can dismiss. Raising an object may present it divine attention, lowering it can return danger to the earth. Crossing a threshold may transform status, especially when accompanied by speech. Ancient records confirm that symbolic substitution played an important role in Mesopotamian rites. A model animal, plant, or crafted object could carry a condition away from a person. The substitute received what the human wished to release. This exchange required careful wording. The priest identified the problem, named the substitute, and declared the transfer. If the relationship remained vague, the ritual risked failing. Names held particular power. To name a force was to define its place within an ordered world. A nameless disturbance remained difficult to address. Priests therefore used long lists of possible causes, divine titles, and hostile beings. The formula might cover several possibilities at once. It could mention a broken promise, an offended ancestor, a forgotten god, an envious neighbour, or an unknown mistake. Such breadth protected the sufferer from uncertainty. You hear the priest repeat a phrase with slight changes. His voice remains even, but one word shifts each time. The pattern surrounds the problem from several directions, leaving fewer spaces where danger might hide. Repetition is not careless excess. It creates enclosure. A spoken formula gains strength through rhythm and established authority. The priest does not invent language during the ceremony. He uses words believed to have succeeded in distant times, perhaps first revealed by Enki himself. This belief places every rite within sacred ancestry. The present priest becomes one link in a chain reaching toward divine wisdom. His personal talent matters, but inherited correctness matters more. A council record from later Mesopotamia proves that ritual specialists could hold recognized professional status. Their learning required years of study, memorization, and supervised practice. The most sensitive formulas were not casual public knowledge. Secrecy served several purposes. It protected ceremonies from misuse, preserved professional authority, and maintained the sense that sacred knowledge demanded discipline. A formula heard without preparation might be misunderstood or performed incorrectly. The priesthood could therefore control not only access to rooms, but access to meaning. You notice a box near the wall, sealed with cord and clay. Inside may rest stones, shells, figurines, knives, cords, and fragments of rare wood. Each object belongs to a network of associations known through training. Lapis-coloured stone suggests the heavens or distant power. Red material may evoke blood, danger, vitality, or protective force. White wool can signify purity. Black wool may absorb or represent threatening conditions. These meanings were not always fixed. Context altered symbolism. The same colour could protect in one ceremony and warn in another. Scholars at Yale University continue debating whether Mesopotamian ritual symbols formed a consistent system across cities and centuries. Some patterns appear widely shared. Others change according to local tradition, period, and individual school. This debate matters because modern researchers naturally seek dictionaries of meaning. Ancient ritual may have resisted such neat organisation. A symbol could behave more like poetry than mathematics. The reed wand in the priest's hand illustrates this uncertainty. It may direct attention, mark space, touch an object, or represent authority. Its meaning depends upon action. He points it towards the four corners of the room, then he touches the doorway and floor. The gesture maps the chamber, transforming architecture into protected territory. You hear no explanation. The petitioner watches carefully, though he understands only fragments. He knows when to bow, when to answer, and when to remain still. The priest controls the deeper sequence. This imbalance can comfort as much as intimidate. A frightened person does not need to master every symbol. He needs confidence that someone else understands the pattern. A quirky modern theory claims that temple gestures preserved a forgotten sign language from a civilization older than Sumer. Supporters compare hand positions on statues and seals, searching for repeated coded messages. Most historians reject the claim because artistic poses often express worship, rank, or convention. No evidence reveals a complete prehistoric language hidden within those images. Still, repeated hand positions may reflect real ceremonial etiquette. Clasped hands signal reverence. Raised hands may express prayer. A hand near the mouth can suggest speech, devotion, or readiness to receive instruction. The images are not random. They show bodies trained to behave differently within sacred space. Posture becomes visible discipline. A priest does not lounge beside the divine image or scratch his head while considering the next formula. Sacred language enters the body. The rite approaches its final movement. The priest loosens the blue wool from his wrist and ties it around the clay figure. He places the stone upon its chest, then carries both toward the outer doorway. The petitioner remains inside the flower circle. At the threshold, the priest speaks a dismissal. He turns the figure toward the waste ground beyond the settlement. An attendant will later remove it to a place where its burden cannot return easily. The flower boundary is swept away. The petitioner steps forward, crossing from protected enclosure into ordinary space. His movement completes the ceremony. Nothing visible has changed. The room looks nearly the same. The stone, the wool, and clay have simply changed position, yet meaning has moved. That movement is the heart of the secret language. Objects become carriers, gestures become commands, directions become moral geography, repetition builds walls that no bricklayer can see. You remain beside the empty table as the priest closes the wooden box. Its lid settles with a soft click. The tools disappear into darkness, waiting for another problem and another carefully remembered sequence. Outside, ordinary speech resumes. Inside the priesthood, the deeper grammar remains guarded. A low drumbeat travels through the temple roof beams as evening gathers above Eridu. The sound is gentle, yet it seems to enter the walls themselves. Dust trembles upon a wooden shelf, and oil flames bend whenever the stretched hide answers. You stand beside a row of musicians waiting near the inner courtyard. One carries a frame drum against her hip. Another steadies a long harp whose strings catch the lamplight. Two singers breathe slowly, preparing their voices without wasting a single note. Their work begins before the ceremony becomes visible. A musician checks each string by touching it near the wooden frame. She listens for wavering tension, then tightens a chord with careful fingers. Dry air can sharpen a string, while damp air can soften it unexpectedly. The instrument must agree with the room. Wooden instruments rarely survive within the soil of southern Mesopotamia. Moisture, insects, and centuries of decay usually erase their bodies. Yet excavations at Ur revealed remarkable lyres decorated with gold, shell, and animal imagery. Those royal instruments belong to a later city and period. Still, they confirm that Mesopotamian musicians possessed sophisticated stringed instruments and valued them greatly. Temple music was not a rough accompaniment produced without training. It demanded knowledge. A singer begins with a quiet tone, holding it until the nearby drummer nods. A second voice enters below the first, creating a narrow interval. Their sound moves through the covered courtyard and returns with softened edges. The plastered walls provide natural resonance. Wooden roofs keep the music enclosed, while open doorways allow selected sounds to travel outward. Architecture becomes part of the performance, shaping every voice before worshippers hear it. A temple singer must know where sound carries well. She understands which corner strengthens a low phrase and which doorway scatters it. Such knowledge is learned through repetition, rather than written explanation. Your ears notice the drum next. Its rhythm does not rush. One beat opens a space, and another arrives only when expectation has settled. The pattern guides breathing, movement, and attention without demanding conscious effort. Priests cross the courtyard according to that measured pulse. Offering bearers lift their feet together, avoiding disorder near the sacred entrance. A curtain rises as the drummer changes the pattern. Music organizes bodies. Later Mesopotamian records confirm that temples employed professional singers, instrumentalists, lamentation specialists, and musical supervisors. Some received grain, oil, wool, or land through institutional support. Their names appear beside other trained servants of the divine household. These performers could hold respected positions. Certain singers served rulers and temples across long careers. Others belonged to families where musical knowledge passed from one generation into another. Training began with imitation. A teacher sang a phrase while the student listened closely. The student repeated it, perhaps several times, until pitch and wording remained stable. Breath control, pronunciation, posture, and emotional restraint all required correction. A beautiful voice alone was insufficient. The singer needed a reliable memory and a disciplined body. Ceremonies could last for extended periods, especially during festivals or laments. A performer who exhausted her voice early might leave the gods with an awkward silence. Clay tablets preserve technical vocabulary connected with tuning and string names. Some texts suggest that musicians understood ordered relationships between strings. Scholars have compared these terms with later theories of musical intervals. The evidence proves structured musical knowledge, though the actual sound remains uncertain. Modern tuning systems cannot simply be placed upon ancient instruments. String materials, instrument shapes, and performance customs would have produced unfamiliar colours. You hear a harp phrase descend slowly beneath the singers. Each note lingers, followed by another slightly lower tone. The movement resembles water flowing down shallow steps. A small drum answers with two muted strokes. The musicians are not competing for attention. Their parts create layers around the sacred words. Instruments support the voice, mark transitions, and signal changes within the ceremony. Some passages may contain no singing at all. A harp could continue while priests completed an action hidden behind a curtain. The music would hold attention during moments when worshippers could see little. Silence also carried meaning. The sudden absence of sound could announce divine presence more effectively than a loud climax. When every instrument stops together, listeners become aware of breathing, clothing, and distant water. The room feels larger. A lead singer raises her hand. The gathered performers begin a repeated response praising Enki's wisdom and generosity. Their voices do not merge perfectly, but the slight differences create warmth and human depth. Repetition allows the assembly to recognize the pattern. Worshippers may answer with a brief phrase, bow at a familiar moment, or simply listen. Music turns complex theology into something the body can remember. An elderly listener may forget the full wording of a hymn. She still recognizes its opening interval and the drum pattern beneath it. Years later, a few notes can return the entire ceremony to her mind. This is one reason sacred music survives beyond written language. Melody stores emotion, timing, and communal identity together. It carries memory through people who may never touch a tablet. Researchers at Oxford have emphasized that ancient musical performance cannot be reconstructed from texts alone. Images show instruments and poses, while tablets preserve terms and lyrics. Neither source records the complete experience of sound within a crowded sanctuary. A scholarly debate remains open concerning who participated in temple music. Some historians imagine performances dominated by trained specialists. Others allow greater participation from gathered worshippers during refrains, processions, and public festival. Both arrangements may have existed. Restricted ceremonies likely depended upon small professional groups. Larger celebrations could draw entire neighborhoods into rhythmic movement and repeated song. The temple's musical life probably changed according to audience, season, and ritual purpose. Gender also shaped musical roles in complicated ways. Women appear prominently as singers, mourners, and players in Mesopotamian records and images. Men also served as instrumentalists, chanters, and ritual performers. Some musicians occupied social categories that do not fit comfortably within modern expectations. Their voices, clothing, or ceremonial identities could mark them as people standing between ordinary roles. Temples sometimes valued precisely that ability to cross boundaries. Enki's domain made such ambiguity meaningful. Music itself crosses boundaries without asking permission. It travels through walls, enters memory, and alters feeling while remaining invisible. A curious fringe theory proposes that temple rhythms were designed to produce controlled trance. Supporters point toward repetition, incense, low light, and prolonged chanting. They imagine priests entering altered states to receive wisdom from hidden waters. Direct evidence for organized trance rituals at early Eridu remains lacking. Repetitive sound can certainly affect attention and emotion, but that does not prove secret visionary techniques. A calm ceremonial rhythm may simply have supported concentration and unity. The ordinary explanation remains powerful enough. Steady music reduces distraction. It synchronizes movement and gives shape to waiting. It helps frightened petitioners feel that the ceremony follows a trusted path. The drummer changes tempo as a procession approaches the central chamber. Harp strings answer with a brighter pattern. While singers lift their voices slightly, no one becomes hurried. The music grows through fullness rather than volume. A priest pauses at the entrance. The singers repeat one divine title several times, each repetition separated by a measured breath. The name settles into the room like fragrant smoke. Then the curtain closes. The instruments continue behind it, though their sound becomes softened by cloth and distance. Worshippers outside receive only fragments. A drum beat arrives clearly, followed by strings that seem to dissolve inside the wall. This partial hearing may deepen sacred distance. The ceremony continues somewhere nearby, but its complete form remains reserved for those within. Sound reveals presence while protecting secrecy. When the curtain opens again, the harp plays a descending phrase. The drummer gives 3 final strokes, each quieter than the last. Singers hold one closing note until their breath gently disappears. Bond speaks immediately. The final silence belongs to the music as surely as any note. Sure. It allows the ceremony to settle within the listener before ordinary movement returns. Feet shift, lamps crackle, and someone quietly clears his throat. Above, the roof beams keep no melody. They hold only faint vibrations, already fading into wood, plaster, and night. Yet each person leaving the courtyard carries a different remainder. One remembers the drum, another remembers a woman's voice rising beneath the lamps. You remain until the last string stops trembling. The musicians cover their instruments, loosen selected chords, and carry them towards protected storage. Their performances vanished completely, except within memory. That disappearance is not failure. Music was never meant to remain like clay. It lived within breath, wood, skin, and listening bodies. For one measured hour it gave shape to invisible worship. Then it returned to silence. A man waits outside the temple with both hands wrapped tightly around his knees. He has not slept for 3 nights. Each time his eyes close, he sees a black dog standing beside his bed, watching without blinking. The animal never moves. At rise, the dream fades, yet the fear remains inside his chest. His family has burned herbs, changed his sleeping place, and whispered promises to several gods. Nothing has helped. Now a temple specialist approaches him. This priest is neither an ordinary attendant nor a simple healer. He studies disturbances that seem to cross the boundary between body, mind, household, and divine order. Illness may concern him, but so may nightmares, strange sounds, repeated accidents, or a sudden feeling that a room has become hostile. He begins by asking questions. When did the dream first appear? What happened during the previous day? Has anyone in the household died recently? Was an oath broken, a burial neglected, or an offering forgotten? The questions move slowly, gathering fragments. Ancient Mesopotamian specialists often treated symptoms as signs within a wider pattern. surviving diagnostic tablets connect bodily changes with possible causes, outcomes, and divine influences. Scholars at the University of Chicago have shown that these texts preserve careful observation alongside religious interpretation. A fever might be described through heat, sweating, weakness, and changes in appetite. A seizure might be observed through movement, breathing, speech, and awareness. The priest watches closely because small details may alter the ritual response. He does not separate physical suffering from spiritual danger. The man with the dream describes the dog's eyes, its position, and the direction it faces. The priest listens without interrupting. A dream figure approaching from one side may carry a different meaning from the same figure approaching from another. Dreams were not always treated as private inventions. They could be messages, warnings, emotional disturbances, or encounters with powers beyond ordinary waking life. Their interpretation required caution because symbols rarely carried one fixed meaning. A dog might suggest protection, healing, death, loyalty, or danger. Its meaning depends upon colour, behaviour, location, and the dreamer's circumstances. The priest asks whether the animal barked. It did not. Silence becomes part of the diagnosis. Another specialist may consult a collection of dream signs copied through generations of scribal training. These collections often organize experiences through repeated patterns. If a person sees one image, a certain outcome may follow. If the image changes, the prediction changes with it. The lists do not remove uncertainty, they give uncertainty a structure. Researchers at Yale have noted that omen literature served both intellectual and practical purposes. It trained specialists to compare signs, preserve inherited knowledge, and advise people facing decisions. The world became readable, though never entirely predictable. A strange birth, unusual animal behaviour, or unexpected weather could all demand interpretation. Even household events might attract attention when they repeated without clear explanation. A lamp that extinguishes once is inconvenient. A lamp that extinguishes every night may become a message. The priesthood therefore employs people skilled in different kinds of reading. One studies dreams, another interprets omens, another performs protective rites. A more senior expert may decide which disturbance requires divine consultation. Their duties overlap, yet training shapes their authority. A dream reader must know symbolic traditions and how to question a frightened person. A purifier must understand materials, boundaries, and spoken formulas. An exorcist must identify hostile forces without strengthening them through careless attention. The word exorcist may suggest shouting and violent struggle. The ancient work was often quieter. It involved washing, recitation, substitution, fumigation, and the controlled removal of troubling influence. The priest prepares a small figure from river clay. He shapes it with simple features, then marks the chest with a reed. The figure represents the fear attached to the dream, not the dreamer himself. A thread is tied around its neck. The man repeats a short statement after the priest. His voice trembles during the first line, then steadies. Each repetition separates him slightly from the image that has followed him through sleep. The clay figure receives the nightmare. A bowl of water stands nearby, mixed with aromatic leaves. The priest washes the man's temples, eyelids, and hands. Smoke from burning juniper moves around his shoulders and settles briefly within his clothing. The room fills with sharp fragrance. The ceremony gives the sufferer something fear rarely provides. It gives him an order of events. He knows when the rite begins, which words belong to him, and how the disturbance will leave. The priest then asks him to describe the dream once more. This time, the man speaks while facing the clay figure, rather than the dark corner of the room. The change is small but deliberate. Some historians interpret such rites primarily as religious responses to supernatural belief, Others emphasize their possible psychological value, especially their ability to externalize fear and restore confidence. The scholarly debate remains open because ancient people did not divide these experiences into modern categories. A ritual could be sincere theology, practical care, and emotional treatment at the same time. The priest may also recommend rest, food, washing, or temporary separation from stressful duties. Surviving texts occasionally combine spoken formulas with plant preparations, bandages, oils, and careful observation. This mixture has encouraged long discussion about the relationship between ancient medicine and ritual. One specialist might prepare a remedy for the body, while another addresses the divine cause. They could work together rather than compete. The patient wanted relief, not a philosophical argument over professional boundaries. Elsewhere in the temple, a woman arrives carrying a child who wakes screaming at the same hour each night. The specialist examines the child's breathing, skin, eyes, and temperature. He asks about food, insects, noise, and recent changes within the household. He also asks whether an old grave lies near the home. The question may seem unrelated, yet ancient diagnosis allowed several worlds to overlap. A child's distress could arise from illness, fear, environmental discomfort, or a restless spirit. The priest considers each possibility through the knowledge available to him. He hangs a protective object near the child's bed. It may bear an image of a frightening guardian whose appearance is intended to terrify lesser dangers. This strange logic appears often in ancient protection. A powerful monster can defend against weaker monsters. The household borrows fear and places it upon its own side. One quirky theory claims that certain protective creatures preserve memories of extinct animals encountered by early humans. Supporters compare exaggerated claws, teeth, and wings with fossils discovered in ancient landscapes. Most scholars find no convincing evidence for this claim. Composite beings are better explained through imagination, symbolism, and the joining of familiar animal traits. Yet the theory shows how strongly these images still provoke curiosity. The child receives a cord of coloured wool. The mother is told when to replace it and which short prayer to speak at night. The instructions give her a role within the protection. She is no longer helpless. Temple specialists also advise rulers and officials. A disturbing dream experienced by a king may concern the entire city. An eclipse, malformed animal, or unusual storm can trigger consultation, fasting, or protective ceremony. Political decisions may pause while experts examine signs, campaigns, building projects, and public festivals can be influenced by interpretations delivered within guarded chambers. This authority carries danger. A priest who predicts disaster may alarm the court. A reassuring interpretation may later appear foolish if events turn badly. Specialists therefore rely upon established collections and cautious phrasing. They rarely promise certainty where signs remain mixed. Perhaps the god is warning of danger. It's possible that the omen concerns another region. The threat may pass if the correct rite is completed. Such language protects both city and interpreter. The man with the black dog now watches as the clay figure is carried outside. An attendant takes it beyond the inhabited quarter and places it where paths divide near the waste ground. The figure faces away from the city. Back inside, the priest opens a window covering. Sunlight crosses the floor and reaches the place where the man has been sitting. He looks exhausted, though his shoulders have lowered. No one can prove that the dream will not return. Still, the nightmare now has a shape, a destination, and an ending. The priesthood has transformed private terror into a problem that can be named and handled. That may be its deepest skill. It stands beside people when experience becomes difficult to explain. It listens for patterns within sickness, sleep, coincidence, and fear. Then it offers a path through the uncertainty. One measured action at a time, the reed stylus presses into damp clay. leaving a wedge that shines briefly before drying. A boy leans over the tablet with narrowed eyes, trying to match the signs spoken by his teacher. His wrist aches, but he does not complain. Around him, other students work in silence. The schoolroom smells of clay, dust, wax smoke, and wool dampened by morning mist. Low benches line the walls, baskets hold unfinished tablets, while shelves support older exercises hardened by sunlight. A teacher walks between the students, carrying a wooden rod. He uses it mainly to point, though every child knows it possesses other educational possibilities. Ancient learning could be dignified, demanding, and occasionally persuasive in a very direct manner. The students begin with simple signs. They copy names of animals, plants, tools, professions, cities, and divine beings. Lists train the hand while organizing the world into categories. The exercise teaches more than writing. It teaches that knowledge can be arranged, repeated, and preserved. A goat belongs beside other animals. Copper belongs beside useful materials. Enki belongs among the gods, although his titles may fill several careful lines. Scribal education became essential within the cities of Mesopotamia. Temple and palace institutions required people who could record grain, labour, land, offerings, legal agreements, and official messages. Archaeological discoveries confirm that thousands of tablets supported these complex economies. Yet some scribes learned far more than accounting. They copied hymns, myths, prayers, incantations, omens, medical instructions, and royal praise poems. Their tablets preserved voices from distant generations, though preservation was never a perfectly innocent act. Every copy creates choices. The teacher recites an old ritual formula while the students listen. Its language is difficult, containing words no longer common in ordinary speech. One student pauses because he does not recognize a sign. The teacher explains the meaning using a newer expression. That explanation already changes the tradition slightly. A strange word becomes familiar through another word. An obscure image receives an interpretation. What was once uncertain begins to appear settled. You watch the student press the revised line into clay. He believes he's copying the past. In truth, he is also helping to remake it. Scholars at Yale and Oxford have examined groups of school tablets that reveal stages of scribal training. Beginners copied short signs and lists. Advanced students reproduced longer literary compositions, sometimes from memory and sometimes from a teacher's model. Errors remain visible. A missing sign may be squeezed between two lines. A mistaken wedge can be rubbed smooth while the clay remains wet. Occasionally, a student begins a line twice, forgets a phrase, or abandons the tablet halfway through. These mistakes are precious to historians. They reveal where a student struggled, which words had become unfamiliar, and how instruction moved from voice into writing. The completed masterpiece often hides its own making. The failed exercise shows the human process beneath it. Temple ritual instructions present an even greater challenge. Many were written in compressed language intended for trained specialists. A line might name several materials, then give a brief command concerning their use. The tablet assumes knowledge it never explains. A reader must know how much oil to pour, how long to burn the plant, and which doorway should receive the smoke. He must understand whether a phrase is spoken once, 3 times, or until a particular action ends. Such details may survive only through oral teaching. A senior scribe sits beside an apprentice and demonstrates the sequence with small objects. He explains where the tablet remains silent. The apprentice watches, repeats the movement, and receives correction. Writing supports memory, but living memory completes the text. This relationship makes the schoolroom part of the priesthood's sacred machinery. The scribe does not merely record ceremonies, he helps determine which version will reach future performers. Suppose two tablets preserve different lines. One names Enki directly, while another uses a title connected with wisdom. The teacher must decide whether both forms are acceptable. He may combine them. A hymn grows by one line. A prayer receives a newer divine title. An old local formula becomes suitable for performance in another city. No grand council announces the change. Tradition shifts quietly beneath the pressure of teaching. A mainstream historical fact emerges clearly from surviving libraries and school collections. Sumerian remained a language of scholarship and ritual long after it ceased to be spoken in ordinary daily conversation. Students learned it because sacred texts, royal traditions, and professional knowledge depended upon it. The language gained authority through age. Its very difficulty made it appropriate for contact with gods and distant ancestors. You hear a student pronounce an old phrase carefully. His accent may differ from that of the people who first composed it centuries earlier. The teacher corrects him according to the school's accepted tradition. Neither man can hear the original voice. This creates an open scholarly debate concerning how faithfully later scribes preserved early liturgies. Some researchers emphasize remarkable continuity in divine titles, ritual structures, and poetic formulas. Others argue that later schools reorganized older material to serve new institutions and rulers. Both possibilities leave traces. A phrase can survive unchanged, while its meaning shifts around it. A ceremony can preserve an ancient name while assigning it a newer purpose. Continuity and invention often occupy the same line. The tablet dries near the doorway. Once hardened, it may enter a storage room with many others. Some tablets are arranged by subject. Others receive labels identifying their opening words. A librarian or senior scribe must remember where each composition belongs. Collections grow through copying, exchange, and recovery. A temple may receive a text from another city. The local school adapts spelling, pronunciation, or divine names. A ritual once connected with one sanctuary enters the service of another god. The journey broadens tradition while weakening its original setting. One quirky theory claims that certain scribal schools preserved secret books describing a civilization existing before the Great Flood. Supporters point toward references to ancient sages, primeval kings, and wisdom recovered from distant times. No surviving tablet provides a complete hidden history of such a civilization. The stories more likely express reverence for remote antiquity and the belief that true knowledge descended from divine sources. Still, the scribes themselves encouraged mystery. They described some texts as secret, restricted, or intended only for learned eyes. Knowledge could be protected because its power depended upon correct use. A ritual formula performed carelessly might fail, or worse. Disturb forces the practitioner did not understand. A tablet could therefore carry warning as well as instruction. The senior teacher removes one composition from a cloth wrapping. He allows only advanced students to examine it. The surface contains an incantation attributed to ancient authority, perhaps linked with Enki and his wise attendants. The students copy slowly. Each wedge becomes an act of preservation, but also interpretation. Their hands decide spacing, sign form, and line division. Their teacher decides pronunciation and meaning. Future priests may trust these decisions without knowing they were ever decisions at all. You look across the schoolroom as sunlight moves along the floor. Rows of clay tablets rest beneath careful hands. Some contain accounts of barley. Others hold prayers meant to protect kings, homes, and frightened children. The difference between administration and sacred memory is thinner than it appears. Both depend upon accurate signs. Both depend upon trained readers. Both can change when one person misunderstands a line. The final student finishes his copy and places it beside the wall. The clay remains soft enough to alter, but the teacher nods. Soon, the words will harden. What survives will seem ancient, stubble, and authoritative, yet beneath every preserved sentence lies a classroom, a correction, and a choice made by someone whose name has vanished. 7 figures stand at the edge of a dark river, their forms half hidden by the dawn mist. They do not resemble kings, soldiers, or ordinary priests. Each carries a small vessel, a cone-shaped object, or a tablet held carefully against the chest. You watch from the reeds as they approach the city. Later Mesopotamian tradition remembers these beings as the 7 sages. They belong to a time before the Great Flood. When divine knowledge first entered the human world, their wisdom includes ritual, craftsmanship, temple building, purification, and the ordering of civilized life. They are not gods in the highest sense. They are intermediaries. Their stories place them between Enki's hidden waters and the vulnerable settlements of humanity. They emerge from the deep carrying knowledge required for cities to survive. They teach people how to measure, build, plant, judge, and worship. The image feels almost peaceful, yet it carries a quiet unease. Human civilization appears unable to begin through human effort alone. Its essential structures arrive from beings connected with a world beneath the visible world. A later priestly catalogue names 7 primeval sages and connects them with ancient rulers. Each mage serves during the reign of a king who belongs to the legendary age before the flood. The list creates a chain of wisdom stretching from divine waters into royal courts. Records from ancient libraries confirm that scholars treated these figures seriously. They appeared within ritual traditions, learned catalogues, protective imagery, and discussions of sacred authority. Researchers at Yale University have studied how Mesopotamian scholars use such primeval figures to explain the origin of expert knowledge. The sages offered legitimacy. A ritual specialist could present his craft as more than personal invention. His knowledge descended through generations from beings who received wisdom near its divine source. The ceremony gained authority because its imagined ancestry reached beyond ordinary history. You enter a chamber where a priest studies a small carved figure. It has a human face, a carefully patterned body, and wings folded behind its shoulders. Another figure nearby appears clothed in the skin of a fish. These images occur most famously in later Assyrian palaces. Protective beings stand beside sacred trees, royal doorways, and ceremonial spaces. They carry buckets and cone-shaped objects, performing gestures whose precise meaning remains debated. Some scholars interpret the cone as a purifier, perhaps used to sprinkle water from the bucket. Others suggest it represents a plant part, a date cluster, or a symbol of fertility. The exact action remains uncertain because no surviving caption explains the scene completely. The figures do not merely decorate walls. They guard boundaries where danger might enter. Their presence transforms doorways into protected passages. A king walking between them appears surrounded by ancient wisdom and invisible defense. The 7 sages therefore move from myth into ritual environment. Their forms become part of the protective system maintained by trained specialists. A carved image can stand watch when human guardians sleep. You hear the faint scratch of a stylus as a scholar copies their names onto clay. He works carefully because names connect identities across time. To miswrite one may weaken the tradition, or confuse one sage with another. The list before him contains more than biography. It creates a genealogy of knowledge. The first sages belong to the world before the flood. Later sages are described more like learned humans, sometimes associated with particular cities and rulers. This change suggests that divine wisdom gradually passes into human institutions. The boundary becomes thinner. A priest, healer, or scholar may never claim to be one of the primeval beings, yet he can present himself as their intellectual descendant. His expertise continues the work they began. Scholars at the University of Chicago have examined how ancient experts constructed such lines of authority. Learned families preserved tablets, titles, and professional identities across generations. Their knowledge gained prestige through both education and ancestry. A father teaches his son a ritual formula. the son later teaches another student. Each transmission appears human, yet the imagined chain begins in sacred waters. This allows ordinary instruction to carry extraordinary weight. A mainstream historical fact remains clear within the surviving evidence. Mesopotamian scholars linked wisdom with institutions such as temples, courts, libraries, and professional families. Knowledge was not treated as freely available to everyone. It belonged to trained communities. The 7 sages embodied that controlled transmission. They reveal knowledge, but not without order. They teach civilization, yet their gifts must be guarded, copied, and performed correctly. Their number also matters. 7 appears repeatedly within Mesopotamian religion, ritual, astronomy and omen traditions, 7 gates, 7 judges, 7 demons, and 7 days can form complete symbolic sets. The number often suggests a structured total rather than an accidental count. You watch 7 lamps being placed along a wall. Their flames do not prove a direct connection with the sages. Still, the arrangement creates balance, sequence, and completeness. Ancient ritual often works through such patterns. A repeated number helps memory. It gives shape to ceremonies and lists. It also suggests that invisible powers possess order, even when human life feels uncertain. One open scholarly debate concerns whether the 7 sages preserve memories of real early teachers. Some historians regard them entirely as mythic figures created to explain the origin of civilization. Others allow that legendary traditions may have gathered around respected specialists from remote antiquity. The evidence cannot identify historical individuals behind them. Names may preserve memory, invention, or both. A famous teacher can become larger through retelling. Several people can merge into one figure. A profession can be personified as a wise being emerging from the water. The uncertainty invites imaginative theories. One fringe claim presents the sages as survivors of a lost advanced civilization destroyed by flood. Supporters argue that these survivors carried mathematics, architecture, and agriculture into younger societies. The theory often treats mythic language as disguised historical reporting. No archaeological evidence confirms such a vanished global civilization teaching Mesopotamia. Early urban development appears gradual, shaped by local innovation, exchange, environmental pressure, and accumulated skill. Yet the legend expresses a genuine historical truth. Knowledge often arrives through strangers. A traveller brings a new method of boat construction. A merchant introduces an unfamiliar measure. A displaced craftsman teaches a city how to work metal more efficiently. Communities remember such gifts long after the giver's name disappears. The sages may transform this ordinary process into sacred narrative. Foreign knowledge becomes wisdom from the deep. Skilled teachers become companions of Enki. A later Greek-speaking Babylonian priest named Berossus described a fish-like teacher who emerged from the sea and instructed humanity. His account was written many centuries after the earliest Sumerian traditions. Yet it preserves the same unsettling pattern. Civilization waits beside the water, then a being approaches with knowledge. Modern readers often focus upon the fish-like appearance, imagining monsters, visitors, or hidden species. Ancient listeners may have cared more about the wisdom carried from one realm into another. Water marked distance from ordinary human experience. A teacher emerging from it possessed authority unavailable to a neighbour arriving through the front gate. You step closer to the riverbank. The 7 figures are no longer visible, though their footprints seem to remain within the mud. Beside one print lies a reed stylus, smooth from long use. Perhaps they were never meant to be remembered as bodies. Perhaps they represented offices, stages of teaching, or categories of sacred knowledge. One preserves ritual, another guards building wisdom, another carries healing, judgment, measurement, or song. The system is never fully explained. That absence protects its power. The priest returns the carved figure to its niche near the doorway. Lamplight passes across its wings and fish-patterned cloak. Its eyes remain wide, fixed upon the room. It guards more than a building. It guards the idea that wisdom entered human history from somewhere deeper, older, and not entirely human. The priesthood inherits that mystery, repeating words whose first teacher cannot be found. Outside of the river moves beneath the mist. No figure rises from it now, still. Every guarded tablet, measured gesture, and inherited formula carries the faint suggestion that someone once emerged from the water and taught humanity how to remember. A white canopy moves above the city street, carried by 4 men beneath the afternoon sun. Beneath it walks the king, his robe bright with woven bands and polished shell. Priests surround him, carrying vessels, reeds, and small tablets wrapped in cloth. You stand among the gathered citizens as the procession passes. Children climb onto mud brick walls for a better view. Farmers leave their carts beside the road. Boatmen secure their ropes and bow their heads while temple singers repeat a measured blessing. The ceremony does not belong only to the sanctuary. Enki's power must reach the entire city, because every household depends upon systems larger than itself. Canals must remain open, fields must receive enough water, storehouses must resist fire, theft and insects. Rulers must judge fairly, or at least convincingly. The king approaches a newly cleared canal. Workers have spent weeks removing silt from its bed. They have repaired collapsed banks, strengthened gates, and redirected channels toward thirsty fields. Their labour appears practical, but the opening receives sacred attention. A priest stands beside the water gate and raises a polished vessel. He speaks words linking the canal with Enki's hidden freshwater domain. The king touches the gate with a reed staff, then signals the workers to release the barrier. Water enters slowly. The first stream moves across cracked earth, carrying bits of grass and loose clay. People watch in silence until the channel begins to fill. Then voices rise, not loudly but with relief. This is survival made visible. Ancient records confirm that Mesopotamian rulers often presented themselves as builders and maintainers of canals. Royal inscriptions praise kings who cleared waterways, strengthened embankments, and brought fertility to abandoned fields. Scholars at Oxford have shown how irrigation and kingship became closely linked within public ideology. A ruler who controlled water appeared to control prosperity. The claim was never entirely true. Thousands of labourers, local officials, farmers, and engineers sustained the system. Yet the ceremony gathered their work beneath one royal image. The king becomes the human guardian of order. Enki remains its divine source. You hear a priest recite the names of nearby settlements. Each place depends upon the same network of channels. A failure upstream can starve families many miles away. Water creates cooperation, but it also creates conflict. One village may divert more than its agreed share. A landowner may cut an illegal opening during darkness. A damaged gate can become the beginning of a feud that lasts several generations. Ritual helps present water management as sacred obligation rather than private advantage. A canal belongs within divine order, even when powerful people benefit more than others. The priest sprinkles the gate with prepared water. He touches its wooden frame, the ropes, and the first stone lining the channel. Workers then place baskets of grain beside the bank. The offering acknowledges dependence. Barley will grow only if water continues moving. Water will continue moving only if canals remain maintained. Maintenance will continue only if people obey schedules, supervisors, and shared rules. The ceremony binds all three together. A council decree from later Mesopotamian cities proves that officials could assign labour for canal repair and impose penalties for neglect. Religion did not replace administration. It gave administration a sacred voice. The king now lifts a clod of damp earth. He holds it before the gathered crowd, then places it into a ceremonial basket. The gesture is simple, but it identifies him with the work of cultivation. He does not carry mud for long. Still, the image matters. Royal ritual transforms practical authority into cosmic responsibility. The king is not merely collecting taxes or ordering workers. He is shown preserving the balance between divine generosity and human effort. You follow the procession toward the city wall. Builders wait beside a foundation trench where a new gate will stand. Within the earth lies a small deposit containing beads, miniature tools, and inscribed clay objects. These items will disappear beneath the building. Foundation deposits are among the quietest forms of ancient ritual. They are created for future gods, rulers, or builders rather than ordinary public display. Archaeologists often discover them only when walls collapse or trenches are reopened. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania have studied such deposits across Mesopotamia. They reveal that construction could begin with purification, offerings, and inscriptions intended to protect the structure. A wall needed more than strong brick. It needed correct beginnings. The king places a prepared brick into the trench. Its surface may carry an inscription naming him as builder. Priests speak blessings over the gate, asking that enemies, floodwater, fire, and decay remain distant. The builders then cover the deposit. No one will see it again. Its hidden position increases its meaning. The objects remain beneath the threshold, supporting the city invisibly. Their presence resembles a promise sealed within the ground. One quirky theory claims that miniature tools found in foundations belong to tiny guardian beings living beneath temples and walls. No reliable evidence supports such creatures, though the idea has a certain sleepy charm. More likely, but the tools represented the labour required to create the structure. They transformed building into a sacred craft placed under divine supervision. The procession continues toward cultivated land beyond the walls. Here, priests inspect the first ripening grain. They walk between rows while farmers watch for signs of pests, disease, and salt. A small bundle of barley is cut and carried toward a temporary altar. The first fruits do not simply celebrate abundancy. They test the relationship between city and field. If the harvest appears strong, the ceremony expresses gratitude and confidence. If the grain is weak, prayers may become more urgent, and officials may begin calculating shortages. A public blessing can comfort the population, but it cannot create grain from empty soil. The priesthood understands this more clearly than later romantic imagination sometimes allows. Temple officials monitor storehouses, labour, and offerings because divine favour must be supported by practical preparation. Sacred confidence works best beside full granaries. Scholars at Yale continue debating how much these public rites shaped political obedience. Some view them mainly as sincere religious service. Others emphasize how ceremonies displayed royal authority and disciplined collective labour. Both readings remain possible. A king may believe deeply in the rite while also benefiting from its performance. Citizens may feel genuine hope while noticing who stands beneath the largest canopy. Belief and power walk together. The citywide liturgy reaches its height during a public assembly near the main gate. Musicians take their places upon a raised platform. Priests carry symbols associated with water, wisdom, and protection. The king stands before the people. He promises to maintain canals, defend boundaries, judge disputes, and support the temples. The exact words may vary, but the structure remains familiar. Royal duty is presented as service to a larger order. The crowd answers with a repeated phrase. Voices rise from merchants, farmers, labourers, widows, officials, and children. Their agreement may be sincere, cautious, or simply wise under the circumstances. Public ritual rarely reveals private opinion. Still, the shared response creates a moment of unity. The city imagines itself as one body protected by divine wisdom. Its walls become skin, its canals become veins, its ruler becomes the hand expected to keep those systems working. And the image is powerful because the city is fragile. A failed harvest can empty markets. A breached canal can destroy fields. A careless ruler can turn cooperation into resentment. A single season of disorder can expose how thin urban confidence truly is. Enki's liturgies answer that fragility with structure. They bless gates, open canals, mark harvests, and place kings beneath divine obligation. They turn maintenance into worship and public work into sacred responsibility. You stand beside the canal as evening settles across the fields. Water moves steadily beneath the fading light. Workers close one gate and open another farther downstream. No hymn controls the current by itself, yet the ceremony reminds everyone that water, power, and survival remain connected. The city endures only while people continue tending the systems they claim the gods have given them. Rain strikes the temple roof with a force rarely heard across the southern plain. Water swills from broken gutters, darkens the outer walls, and gathers within the streets already softened into mud. Families lift baskets onto shelves while boatmen tighten ropes around posts near the swollen channels. You smell wet earth everywhere. The river has risen for days, carrying branches, drowned reeds, and pieces of distant buildings. Officials measure its height against marked walls, hoping the current will settle. Instead, the water climbs another hand's breadth before sunset. Inside the sanctuary, priests speak quietly. They have performed the usual protections, offerings have been presented, boundaries purified, and divine names repeated with exact care. Yet the flood continues approaching, indifferent to every human sequence. That indifference creates a dangerous question. What happens when sacred order appears unable to protect the cities? Mesopotamian flood traditions preserve memories of overwhelming water, ruined settlements, and divine decisions hidden from humanity. One fragmentary Sumerian composition describes cities receiving kingship before the gods choose to send a devastating flood. A pious ruler receives warning and survives within a great vessel. The surviving tablet is damaged, leaving crucial motives uncertain. Whole passages disappear where the clay is broken. The gods decide, the storm arrives, and human life nearly vanishes between missing lines. Archaeological research confirms that several ancient Mesopotamian cities experienced severe flooding at different periods. Excavators found layers of river sediment separating phases of occupation at sites including Ur, Kish, and Shurapak. The deposits do not belong to one identical date. Researchers connected with Oxford have therefore emphasized repeated regional disasters, rather than one single flood covering the entire world. River courses shifted, embankments failed, and low settlements could disappear beneath silt within a short season. For survivors, the distinction mattered little. Their world had ended. You stand upon a roof while brown water enters the street below. Storage jars float from a collapsed doorway. A goat cries from a platform crowded with frightened people. Beyond the houses, familiar field boundaries have vanished beneath one restless surface. The temple remains visible because its platform stands higher. Families move toward it carrying infants, grain, blankets, and household gods. Sacred elevation becomes practical refuge. Priests open outer rooms to the displaced population. Storerooms become sleeping places. Courtyards fill with wet clothing, coughing children, and arguments over food. The divine household now shelters human households. Yet the sanctuary itself begins to fail. Water enters through foundation cracks. Plaster slides from lower walls. Wooden supports swell and twist beneath the pressure. An attendant discovers that one sacred chamber has flooded during darkness. He finds bowls overturned and ritual objects drifting against the doorway. the scene carries more than physical damage. A protected boundary has been violated. The priests must decide whether polluted objects can be cleansed, buried, or replaced. They must preserve divine dignity while everyone can see the temple struggling against the same disaster. A senior priest orders damaged furnishings covered with cloth. He removes sacred emblems before the wall collapses. Their departure is controlled, but the meaning remains unsettling. The god appears to be leaving. Mesopotamian laments often describe cities abandoned by their divine protectors. Temples become silent, gates break, animals wander through sacred places, and familiar songs cease. Disaster is presented not merely as military or environmental failure, but as divine withdrawal. The god departs before order collapses completely. This idea may have helped ancient communities explain unbearable events. A powerful deity had not been defeated by water or enemies. The deity had chosen to withdraw for reasons humans only partly understood. Such reasoning protected divine power, though it deepened human anxieties. Perhaps someone had neglected a festival. Perhaps a ruler had acted unjustly. Perhaps an unknown offence had accumulated beneath ordinary life. When causes remained invisible, almost any failure could become spiritually significant. Priests responded by searching tradition. They examined omens, dreams, ritual errors, and remembered warnings. They repeated prayers asking the god to return, even when the original sanctuary lay broken beneath mud. A scholarly debate remains open concerning how literally city laments reflect historical catastrophes. Some historians read them beside evidence of warfare, abandonment, and environmental change. Others emphasize their literary conventions, repeated across different cities regardless of each event's exact cause. The laments may preserve history shaped into ritual language. They do not describe disaster like modern reports. They describe how disaster feels when streets, temples, government, memory, and divine favour collapse together. You hear a lament singer sitting near the flooded gate. Her voice moves slowly through names of ruined places. She calls canals empty. Although water surrounds her, she calls houses childless. Although families crowd the temple roof. The contradiction expresses loss rather than measurement. A city may contain survivors and still feel dead. When the water finally recedes, it leaves thick grey silt across every room. Fish lie within courtyards. Walls lean at uncertain angles. Fields remain covered with debris and bitter pools. People descend carefully from the temple platform. Their first work is not grand reconstruction. They recover tools, search for grain, clear bodies of animals, and mark places where missing relatives were last seen. Sacred ceremony continues among these practical tasks because grief demands structure. Priests gather damaged ritual objects beside a clean patch of ground. Some are washed and returned to use. Others are judged beyond restoration. A broken sacred vessel cannot enter ordinary rubbish. It may be buried within the precinct, placed beneath a new floor, or sealed inside a designated deposit. Its usefulness ends, but its connection with the divine household remains. This practice creates strange archaeological gatherings. Broken bowls, figurines, ashes, and ceremonial fragments appear together beneath later buildings. Modern excavators may interpret them as ritual deposits, though their exact purpose often remains uncertain. Perhaps they were respectfully retired. Perhaps they marked rebuilding. Perhaps they contained objects whose meanings had already become unclear to the priests who buried them. That final possibility is especially quiet and disturbing. Ritual traditions can survive longer than explanations. A priest may repeat a gesture because his teacher required it. The teacher may have learned it from someone who offered a different reason. Centuries pass, and the action remains stable while its story changes. One generation says a vessel represents the deep waters, another says it recalls the flood, A later priest may simply say that the vessel has always stood there. The rite continues through obedience. A quirky theory suggests that some flood ceremonies preserved coded instructions for surviving future disasters. Supporters search myths for practical warnings about boats, grain storage, and elevated ground. They imagine priesthoods hiding emergency knowledge inside sacred stories. No evidence proves a complete secret survival code, yet flood traditions certainly carry practical memories. They remind listeners that water can rise, cities can fail, and provision should not be trusted to optimism alone. Myth can warn without becoming a manual. The rebuilt temple rises upon a higher platform. Old foundations disappear beneath new brick, and flood sediment becomes part of the sacred mound. Priests restore offerings, songs, and processions within rooms shaped differently from those destroyed. They claim continuity. The claim is necessary because catastrophe has broken more than architecture. It has interrupted confidence. Worshippers must believe the relationship with Enki can be renewed, even if nobody fully understands why it failed. A return ceremony welcomes divine presence into the restored sanctuary. Doors are opened, lamps are lit, and sacred objects enter beneath cloth coverings. Musicians perform compositions associated with renewal. Perhaps every word follows ancient tradition. Perhaps new lines have been added. The distinction may already be impossible to recognize. You walk through the completed temple while fresh plaster still smells damp. Beneath the floor rests the ruined sanctuary, filled with silt and carefully buried fragments. Its ceremonies have not vanished completely, yet they no longer exist in their original world. They have survived through transformation. Outside, the river moves quietly within repaired banks. Children play beside channels that once carried destruction through their homes. Their parents watch the water with a respect sharpened by memory. Inside, priests perform the restored liturgy. They ask Enki to remain within his city. They praise hidden waters as sources of life. They speak carefully, because everyone understands that sacred presence can feel permanent until the day it disappears. Perhaps the gods never withdrew. Perhaps people only gave divine meaning to slums, ruin, and uncontrollable water. Yet the abandoned chamber leaves its own question beneath the rebuilt floor. How long can a rite survive after its first meaning is gone? A narrow boat leaves Eridu carrying sealed jars, folded cloth, and several tablets wrapped against the damp air. Its passengers include merchants, servants, and one priest whose hands remain folded beneath his cloak. The channel bends northward through reeds silvered by early light. No procession marks their departure. Sacred traditions often travel quietly, hidden among ordinary cargo. A ritual vessel may rest beside baskets of onions. A hymn may cross the marsh inside the memory of one tired traveller. The priest watches settlements appear along the waterways. Each community possesses its own customs, divine patrons, accents, and inherited fears, yet all depend upon water, grain, labour, and protection from forces beyond easy understanding. Enki's ceremonies can enter these places because their concerns already feel familiar. A household needs cleansing after illness. A ruler seeks wisdom before judgment. A city fears flood, drought, fire, and unseen hostility. The priest carries procedures that answer such anxieties. He knows formulas for purified water, gestures for opening sacred space, and words connecting human order with the deep freshwater source. When he reaches another sanctuary, he does not rebuild Eridu exactly, he listens first. The local priests explain their temple's divine patron and ceremonial calendar. They describe which plants grow nearby, which vessels are available, and which language the congregation understands. The visiting specialist then adjusts his practice. Enki's name may remain central, especially where wisdom and purification are required. Elsewhere, his authority appears through titles, divine relationships, or references to sacred water. The structure survives while the surface changes. This process allows ritual traditions to move beyond one city without becoming obvious copies. A local ceremony may invoke another god publicly, while preserving actions associated with Enki's priestly world. The same basin stands near the doorway, the same cleansing branch touches the threshold, the same sequence separates danger from the protected community. Historical records confirm that Mesopotamian cities exchanged scribes, musicians, craftsmen, diplomats, and ritual specialists. Tablets found across the region preserve related compositions with local variations. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania have shown that scribal networks connected distant centers through education, copying, and professional exchange. Knowledge traveled with people, not merely with official decrees. The journey northward follows rivers and canals. Receives traditions through its temples and royal institutions. Lagash adapts them within its own sacred landscape. Nippur, respected as a major religious center, preserves learned texts associated with many gods. Each city reshapes what arrives. A hymn copied at Nippur may use spelling different from an Eridu tradition. A purification rite performed at may replace one ingredient with another. A local priest may expand a prayer to honor the city's principal deity. These changes do not necessarily indicate careless corruption. They reveal survival through adaptation. A ritual that refuses every alteration may disappear when its original setting changes. A ritual that accepts every alteration may lose its identity. Priests work between those dangers, preserving recognizable patterns while serving present needs. You enter a northern temple where the air feels drier and cooler. The walls rise higher than those beside the marshes. Courtyards hold different plants, and the nearby river carries another colour of silt. Yet a priest prepares water in a familiar manner. He places the vessel upon clean reeds. He circles it with fragrant smoke. He names the deep source beneath the earth. The worshippers may never have visited Eridu. They may know it only as an ancient city mentioned in hymns and temple catalogues. Still, its ritual imagination has entered their sanctuary. Eridu becomes more than a place. It becomes a claim of origin. Priests can strengthen a ceremony by connecting it with the oldest sacred center. A formula associated with Eridu appears venerable, tested, and close to the first ordering of civilization. Antiquity itself becomes authority. This tendency creates an open, scholarly debate. Historians at Oxford question whether references to Eridu always preserve genuine local traditions or sometimes serve as later claims of prestige. A priestly school may invoke Eridu because the connection is real, another may invoke it because ancient origins impress patrons. The surviving tablets rarely reveal which motive dominated. Both possibilities can exist within one tradition. A genuine inherited formula may gain new importance because later scholars admire its supposed age. Language changes most visibly. Sumerian remains important within learned and sacred settings, but ordinary speech shifts across the region. Akkadian becomes increasingly prominent in administration, literature, and daily communication. Priests must operate between languages. A ritual title may remain in Sumerian because its sound carries authority. Instructions may be explained in Akkadian to younger specialists. A bilingual tablet can place terms beside one another, allowing an old formula to survive within a changing world. Translation never moves meaning perfectly. One word for purity may carry legal, physical, and sacred associations that another language divides differently. A divine title may sound majestic in one tongue and strangely plain in another. The translator must choose. Sometimes he preserves the old word without explaining it completely. The phrase becomes ceremonial language, repeated because tradition demands it. Its obscurity can increase its power. A worshipper hears sounds belonging to scholars, temples, and distant antiquity. He may understand only portions, yet the unfamiliar wording signals that ordinary conversation has been left behind. This pattern appears across many religious cultures. Ancient language becomes sacred partly because it is no longer ordinary. A temple singer learns the old pronunciation from her teacher. The teacher learned it from another performer decades earlier. Small changes enter through accent, memory, and local melody. No committee notices. After several centuries, the hymn still bears its ancient name. Though its sound has travelled far from the first performance, ritual objects travel as well. A particular basin shape may appear in several cities. Protective figurines follow related designs. Fish imagery, flowing streams, and goatfish symbols identify Enki's presence, even where his sanctuary is not dominant. Craftspeople copy forms while introducing local materials. Stone replaces shell. Cedar replaces marshwood. Imported metal gives a familiar object greater prestige. A curious fringe theory claims that identical ritual symbols across Mesopotamia prove control by one hidden priestly order centered at Eridu. Supporters imagine secret messengers directing ceremonies throughout the region. No evidence confirms such a centralized order. Shared symbols are better explained through trade, travel, scribal education, political influence, and imitation. Priests did not need a concealed empire to exchange successful ideas. Human networks are mysterious enough. A healer hears that another city uses a certain plant effectively. A scribe obtains a respected incantation from a travelling colleague. A ruler imports specialists after witnessing an impressive ceremony abroad. Knowledge spreads through admiration and necessity. Political conquest also moves ritual traditions. When one city dominates another, temples may receive new officials, offerings, or divine relationships. Victorious rulers collect statues, tablets, and specialists as signs of authority. Yet conquered traditions often influence the conqueror. A powerful city may adopt the rituals of an older sanctuary because age provides legitimacy. The conqueror takes control, then borrows the conquered city's sacred memory. Enki's ceremonies benefit from this pattern. They offer practical protection, intellectual prestige, and connection with the imagined beginnings of civilized order. Their usefulness allows them to survive shifting dynasties. You watch another tablet being copied in a northern school. The opening line names Eridu. The instructions mention water, incense, wool, and a doorway. A local note appears beside one ingredient, offering a substitute more easily obtained nearby. The ceremony is no longer exactly what it was. It remains recognizable. This is how liturgy travels. Does not move like a sealed treasure untouched by human hands. It passes through accents, climates, political changes, missing ingredients, and the preferences of teachers. Each adaptation risks loss. Each adaptation also prevents extinction. The priest from Eridu finishes his visit and prepares to continue along the river. He leaves one copied tablet, 2 trained assistants, and several corrected pronunciations behind. The local sanctuary keeps what it finds useful. Years later, nobody remembers the traveller's face. The ceremony remains, now described as an ancient custom of the city itself. Water passes from one channel into another. Its course changes, but its source is still remembered. Moonlight lies across Babylon's walls while priests cross a courtyard paved with baked brick. Their lamps move beneath painted lions, glazed flowers, and towering gates built to impress both gods and human visitors. Within one chamber, an older name is spoken differently. Enki has become Ea. The god's character remains recognizable beneath the change. He still governs wisdom, purification, craftsmanship, magic, and the fresh water deep beneath the earth. Yet Babylonian priests serve him within another political world, surrounded by larger courts, wider empires, and new fears. Languages change the sound of divinity. Sumerian scholars called him Enki, a name connected with lordship and the earth. Akkadian speakers increasingly called him Ea, preserving his sacred identity while reshaping how worshippers addressed him. The new name does not erase the old one. Priests continue copying Sumerian hymns, divine titles, and ritual phrases long after Akkadian becomes dominant in daily life. A learned specialist may pray in one language, explain the rite in another, and record instructions using both. The ceremony becomes layered. Ancient words carry prestige because they seem closer to the first age of sacred knowledge. Newer words carry clarity because worshippers and younger priests understand them more easily. The liturgy must satisfy both memory and usefulness. A senior priest opens a tablet case inside the temple archive. Several tablets contain incantations written in parallel columns. One gives an old Sumerian formula. Another offers an Akkadian translation or explanation. The two versions do not always match perfectly. A phrase describing hidden water may become a phrase describing cosmic wisdom. A title emphasizing fertile earth may shift toward mastery of ritual knowledge. Translation changes emphasis. Babylonian scholars do not merely preserve Enki under another sound, they expand Ea's role within a vast learned system of gods, demons, stars, omens, illnesses, and protective powers. He becomes the supreme source of ritual intelligence. When a priest confronts a dangerous disturbance, he often appeals to Ea as the divine master who knows every remedy. Ea understands the names of hostile forces, the materials that repel them, and the words that restore order. His son Marduk may receive the practical task. A ritual text can describe Marduk approaching Ea with news of human suffering. Ea listens, recognizes the condition, and explains the cure. The younger god then carries the remedy into the world. This structure mirrors Babylonian theology. Marduk rises as the great patron of Babylon and eventually receives exceptional political importance. Yet Ea remains the deep source of wisdom behind him. The father knows, the son acts. The arrangement allows priests to honor Babylon's leading god while preserving Ea's ancient authority. New religious power grows from an older foundation rather than replacing it completely. Records from major temple libraries confirm that Babylonian scholars preserved enormous collections of incantations, omens, prayers, and ritual instructions. Researchers at Yale University have shown how learned families copied these texts through long periods of political change. Kings fall, cities burn, tablets survive through recopying. A composition may pass from one library into another, gathering corrections, explanations, and new divine names. Priests compare versions, restore damaged lines, and decide which reading belongs within performance. Their work creates continuity, though not perfect stability. The empire surrounding them produces new anxieties. Babylonian rulers govern territories containing many cities, languages and divine traditions. Rebellion, invasion, epidemic disease, eclipse, and royal succession can threaten the appearance of cosmic order. Ea's wisdom becomes valuable because disorder feels increasingly complicated. A village problem might involve one household and one neglected shrine. An imperial problem might involve an army, a plague, an ominous planet, and several governors writing contradictory reports. The gods require a larger administration. Babylonian priests respond with ceremonies of extraordinary detail. They classify dangers, organize protective objects, and preserve long sequences of recitation. Ritual becomes a technology of uncertainty. You enter a chamber prepared for a royal purification. The king has received a troubling omen. Perhaps an eclipse darkened the moon, or an unusual birth occurred among palace animals. Court scholars fear the sign may concern his life. No one treats the matter casually. A substitute king may temporarily receive the dangerous fate. The true ruler withdraws from public view, changes clothing, and avoids certain activities while priests perform protective rites. The practice appears strange, yet its logic follows the omen system. If danger attaches to the royal office, another person can occupy that position briefly and receive the threat. Ea's wisdom supports the transfer. Priests speak formulas identifying the substitute, the king and the hostile destiny. Clothing, food, seating, and titles become tools within the exchange. Scholars at the University of Chicago continue debating how literally rulers and priests understood these substitutions. Some emphasize sincere belief that fate could be redirected. Others stress political calculation and court management. Fear and strategy may have shared the same room. A king could believe the danger was real while also using ritual withdrawal to control public reaction. Priests could trust their formulas, while understanding that ceremony preserved confidence during crisis. Ea stands behind both needs. His intelligence offers a path through fate without openly denying the omen. The warning remains valid, but ritual creates an alternative route. This is Babylonian subtlety. The god does not destroy the system of signs. He teaches specialists how to navigate it. One curious tradition portrays Ea as so clever that he can respect a divine command while quietly helping humanity escape its harshest consequences. In flood stories, he warns a favoured man indirectly, speaking through a wall rather than openly breaking an oath. The detail reveals his character. Ea does not confront authority with noise, he bends language until mercy becomes possible. A fringe theory claims that the name Ea preserves a memory of a prehistoric culture whose language vanished completely. Supporters search for hidden roots beyond Sumerian and Akkadian. Imagining an older priesthood beneath both traditions, the linguistic evidence remains uncertain and does not prove such a lost civilization. Divine names can preserve ancient forms without carrying a secret historical record. Still, names often survive when explanations fade. A priest may know that Ea belongs to the deep waters while remaining unsure how the earliest worshippers understood the name itself. He repeats it because generations have repeated it. The sound becomes a vessel. Babylonian liturgies also enlarge Ea's family and divine court, or his wife, associated with the deep and with maternal power, appears under changing names. His sons, attendants, and ritual servants receive places within scholarly catalogues. Divine genealogy organizes sacred functions. One god carries messages, another defeats hostile forces, another supervises purification. Ea remains the source from which their specialized powers flow. This structure resembles the empire itself. Authority descends through ranks, offices, and delegated duties. Heaven reflects administration, perhaps because priests understand both through similar habits of thought. A scholarly debate remains open concerning how much theology copied political organization. Some historians see divine courts reflecting royal institutions. Others argue that sacred traditions also shaped how rulers imagined power. The influence likely moved in both directions. Babylonian priests adapt older rites to new temples, larger festivals, and imperial ceremonies. They preserve ancient water symbolism while surrounding it with expanded prayers, lists, and protective sequences. A simple cleansing becomes part of a cosmic argument. The priest names Ea, Marduk, the stars, the winds, and the ordered heavens. He identifies the patient within a universe crowded with possible causes. The rite grows longer because the world has grown more intellectually crowded. You hear the final Akkadian prayer spoken beneath a painted ceiling. Its rhythm differs from the old Sumerian hymn, yet the appeal remains familiar. Hidden wisdom must rise, pollution must depart, human order must be repaired. The priest places the tablet back inside its case, on its surface. Enki's ancient identity and Ea's Babylonian authority rest within the same lines. The god has changed names without surrendering his depths. A tablet rests within a library room far from the marshes of Eridu. Its clay is darker, its signs are later, and its edges bear the marks of careful handling. Yet one line still calls upon wisdom rising from the freshwater deep. You feel the distance between composition and memory. The priest reading this text belongs to a world of stone palaces, fortified cities, and royal archives. He may never have seen Eridu. He may know its landscape only through old hymns and sacred catalogues. Still, the ritual directs his attention southward. It asks him to imagine hidden water beneath the earth, divine knowledge beneath confusion, and healing beneath suffering. These ideas carry the shape of Enki's oldest sacred identity. Later Mesopotamian incantations preserve many such echoes. They do not reproduce one complete Eridu liturgy. Instead, they contain fragments of imagery, repeated structures, and divine conversations shaped by the older priestly traditions. A patient lies upon a mat while a ritual specialist prepares a bowl nearby. The illness has lasted many days, bringing fever, weakness, and dreams filled with unfamiliar voices. Family members wait outside the chamber. The priest begins by describing the suffering. He names the aching limbs, the troubled breath, the restless sleep, and the fear surrounding the household. Each symptom enters the ritual language before any remedy appears. Then the divine pattern unfolds. A younger god observes the human distress and carries news to the Lord of Wisdom. The wise god listens, recognizes the hidden cause, and reveals the proper treatment. This repeated structure appears throughout later healing and protective traditions. Scholars at the University of Chicago have identified it as one of the clearest signs of inherited priestly thought. The story gives authority to the remedy. The human priest does not claim to invent the cure. He repeats knowledge first spoken within the divine household. His instructions therefore arrive from a source older than any living teacher. A plant becomes more than a plant. Oil becomes more than oil. Water becomes more than water. Each material enters a sacred explanation connecting it with the wisdom beneath creation. The ritual specialist acts as translator between divine instruction and human need. The words may be later, but the structure feels ancient. You hear the priest crush leaves inside a stone bowl. He mixes them with oil while reciting lines concerning purity, release, and restored breath. His hands perform practical work. His voice places that work within sacred order. This combination may explain why old forms survived. A useful remedy could remain attached to an inherited prayer. A respected prayer could preserve the memory of materials once used within another sanctuary. Neither element remained unchanged. Plants varied by region. Words changed through translation. Divine titles expanded as new cities and rulers shaped religious life. Yet the relationship between action and sacred explanation endured. A mainstream historical fact emerges from ancient libraries discovered at cities such as Nineveh and Asher. Large collections preserve healing, purification, omen, and protective texts copied by trained specialists. Many tablets belong to organized series. One tablet treats fever, another addresses nightmares, another protects a house against destructive forces. The arrangement shows that ritual knowledge became increasingly classified. Priests grouped problems, remedies, and prayers into systems that could be taught, copied, and consulted. Such order reflects scholarly ambition. A disturbance should not remain nameless. A remedy should not remain unrecorded. A useful prayer should not disappear with one practitioner. Yet classification also changes tradition. Once a ceremony enters a tablet series, editors may shorten, expand, or rearrange it. A local custom becomes part of a larger professional collection. The ritual gains reach while losing some of its original setting. You imagine a scholar comparing two damaged tablets. One comes from a southern city, another belongs to a northern library. Both describe cleansing a doorway with water and fragrant smoke. Their wording differs, but their sequence remains close. The scholar combines them. He chooses one divine title, restores a missing verb, and places the ceremony within a larger collection. His work preserves the rite, though it also creates a version no earlier priest performed exactly. This process forms one open scholarly debate. Some historians believe later incantation collections preserve genuine fragments of very old temple practices. Others argue that learned editors created artificial antiquity by arranging newer material beneath ancient divine names. The surviving evidence supports caution. A formula can be old in structure but late in wording. A divine image can be ancient while its ritual purpose changes. A ceremony can preserve Eridu's memory without preserving Eridu's exact performance. The echoes remain indirect. Protective prayers reveal another pattern. A house is treated like a vulnerable body. Its doorway receives attention because it marks the point where outside danger enters domestic space. Windows, corners, beds, and hearths may also receive ritual protection. Small figures are buried beneath thresholds. Knotted cords hang near sleeping places. Words of command identify the home as belonging to ordered human life. The ritual specialist invokes wisdom associated with the deep waters, even when the ceremony occurs far from Enki's temple. The divine source has become portable. This portability matters. A city may fall, a temple may close, a language may change. A formula carried within trained memory can travel elsewhere. The oldest sanctuary survives as a pattern of thought. One curious feature appears within prayers against unnamed danger. The text sometimes lists many possible causes without choosing one. It mentions offense, curse, neglected duty, hostile spirit, broken promise, and unknown anger. The ritual surrounds uncertainty with language. This technique resembles a net cast widely through dark water. The priest cannot see the cause clearly, so he names every likely shape. Later scholars developed these lists with impressive patience. Their collections can feel almost endless, as though danger might escape through one forgotten category. There is gentle comedy within that seriousness, and the gods may forgive many things, but the scribes preferred not to test whether incomplete paperwork counted among them. A fringe theory claims these long lists conceal numerical codes connected with stars and planetary cycles. Supporters search repeated phrases, divine names, and line counts for hidden astronomical patterns. Some ritual texts certainly relate to celestial observation. However, no convincing evidence proves that every repeated list conceals one secret cosmic code. Repetition often serves simpler purposes. It strengthens memory, it widens protection, it reassures the sufferer that no possibility has been ignored. The patient hears his fear named from several directions. Even without understanding every line, he senses that the priestly tradition has encountered such darkness before, that recognition can calm the room. The ritual concludes with a language of release. Illness leaves the body, danger leaves the house, pollution returns to an empty place, the patient rises, the doorway is opened, and fresh air enters. Nothing dramatic occurs. The power lies within completion. A condition that seemed endless has been given a sequence with a final movement. The ceremony announces that disorder does not possess unlimited time. Perhaps this is the deepest echo of Enki's forgotten priesthood. Wisdom does not always prevent suffering. It identifies, contains, and redirects suffering through knowledge patiently applied. You stand inside the distant library as the tablet returns to its shelf. Hundreds of other texts rest beside it, each carrying fragments of older voices. No single tablet preserves the lost liturgy. Together, they suggest its outline. Water remains sacred, speech remains precise, healing remains an act of restoring relationships between body and household, city yasir, and invisible order. The marsh sanctuary has vanished from sight, yet its ideas continue moving through clay, memory, and ritual hands. An echo is not the original voice. Still, it proves that something once spoke. Sunlight enters the excavation trench at a steep angle, revealing colours hidden within the earth. One layer is pale brown, another grey with ash. and another almost black from ancient burning. A thin floor of hardened clay runs beneath them, smooth where forgotten feet once passed. You kneel beside the exposed surface. Nothing here speaks clearly. A broken bowl lies near a doorway. Fish bones rest beside a raised platform. A narrow drain cuts through one wall, while a shallow basin occupies the corner of another room. Each object suggests human action, yet none explains itself. This is where reconstruction begins. Archaeologists do not uncover ceremonies preserved like sealed performances. They uncover consequences. A repeated stain may mark pouring, a polished threshold may show frequent passage, a cluster of vessels may indicate storage, preparation, washing, or offering. The difficulty lies within possibility. One room can support several interpretations. A basin may serve purification, food preparation, craft production, or ordinary cleaning. A platform may hold an altar, a seat, a work surface, or something made from perishable material. Context narrows the choices but rarely removes uncertainty. Researchers at the University of Chicago have long emphasized the importance of stratigraphy, the careful study of layers formed through occupation, rebuilding, destruction, and abandonment. At Eridu, temple structures were built repeatedly upon older sacred foundations. Each phase preserves a different arrangement of rooms and walls. By comparing them, archaeologists observe how movement changed through time. Doorways shift, platforms grow larger, access becomes more restricted, storage spaces appear where open areas once stood. These changes reveal increasing organization. They do not reveal the exact prayer spoken beside the wall. You watch an excavator clean the floor with a soft brush. A small patch of reddish material appears near the base of a platform. Samples are taken carefully and sent for laboratory study. Microscopic analysis may identify ash, plant remains, mineral pigments, fats, or traces of fermented substances. Chemical residues inside vessels can reveal oils, grains, resins, and animal products invisible to ordinary sight. Such methods have transformed archaeological interpretation. A jar once labelled simply as ceremonial may prove to have contained beer. A bowl assumed to hold water may preserve traces of aromatic oil. A burned deposit may contain juniper, tamarisk, or imported wood. Materials begin to regain identity. Still, identity is not meaning. Finding cedar resin inside a room does not prove which words accompanied its burning. Beer within a vessel does not reveal whether it served a god, a priest, a worker, or an exhausted excavator from several thousand years later. Archaeology can identify ingredients. Liturgy requires sequence. To reconstruct sequence, researchers study where objects were found in relation to doors, platform, drains, and one another. A vessel beside a threshold may suggest entrance ritual. Several cups near a central platform may suggest presentation or distribution. Spatial patterns matter. If the same arrangement appears across several building phases, continuity becomes more likely. If it appears only once, it may reflect a temporary custom, an accident, or a room used differently during one period. Scholars at Oxford have compared temple plans across southern Mesopotamia to understand shared traditions and local variation. Similar architectural features can suggest related ceremonial habits, though copying a building does not guarantee copying every rite performed inside it. Architecture guides behaviour without controlling it completely. A narrow doorway slows movement. A raised floor creates hierarchy. A hidden chamber restricts vision. These features shape worship even when spoken words change. You enter a reconstructed room built from mud brick near an archaeological research centre. Its dimensions follow an ancient plan. The ceiling is low, the walls are thick, and daylight enters through one narrow opening. Researchers use such experimental spaces to study heat, sound, smoke, and movement. A chant behaves differently here than within a modern museum hall. The voice becomes warmer and more enclosed. Incense lingers beneath the roof. A small lamp creates enough light for nearby work, but leaves the edges of the room uncertain. Experimental archaeology cannot reproduce the original ceremony. It can test practical limits. How many people fit inside without crowding? How quickly does smoke gather? Can one singer be heard from the courtyard? How heavy is a filled vessel carried along a narrow passage? The body answers questions that plans cannot. You lift a replica jar and discover that its handles become uncomfortable after several minutes. The vessel demands 2 hands, which means the carrier cannot open doors alone. Another attendant must accompany him. A simple object reveals cooperation. A large bowl placed upon a high platform requires lifting, perhaps during a visible moment. A lamp positioned behind a screen creates moving shadows. A drain near the central chamber suggests repeated pouring or washing. Every detail adds another thread. Comparative texts provide additional guidance. Later hymns, offering lists, purification instructions, and temple regulations describe actions that may illuminate earlier remains. Scholars compare these writings with architectural evidence, searching for patterns that persist across time. This method carries danger. A text written centuries later can easily be projected onto an older building. A Babylonian ceremony may differ greatly from a prehistoric Eridu practice, even when both honour the same divine figure. The old sanctuary must not become a stage filled with later customs simply because those customs survived in writing. An open, scholarly debate concerns how much ritual continuity can reasonably be assumed. Some historians believe repeated sacred rebuilding reflects long preservation of ceremonial structure. Others argue that the meaning of the site may have changed sharply while architecture maintained traditional forms. A room can keep its shape while its purpose changes. A prayer can keep its opening while its meaning shifts. A priest can inherit an object without inheriting its first explanation. This uncertainty does not make reconstruction useless. It makes careful language necessary. Researchers speak of likelihood, possibility, and comparison. They distinguish direct evidence from inference. A fishbone is evidence. Calling it an offering is interpretation that the difference protects honesty. One quirky theory claims that unexplained wall niches at early temples held devices for producing hidden voices, allowing priests to make gods appear to speak. Supporters imagined tubes, concealed chambers, and carefully directed echoes. No physical evidence confirms such machinery at Eridu. Niches more likely held lamps, offerings, emblems, or structural supports, yet the theory reveals how easily silence invites invention. Empty spaces attract confident stories. The most responsible reconstruction often feels less satisfying because it preserves uncertainty. It may conclude that a room was ritually important without identifying the ceremony. It may identify repeated burning without knowing whether the smoke honoured, purified, protected, or mourned. You stand above the deepest temple level as the afternoon light withdraws from the trench. Labels mark walls, floors, deposits, and object locations. Drawings preserve measurements. Photographs capture surfaces that will change once exposed to air. The excavation itself is irreversible. Removing one layer reveals another while destroying the original relationship between them. Archaeologists therefore record each stage with patience, knowing that future researchers must rely upon their notes. Interpretation becomes an inheritance. A mistaken label can mislead decades of study. A carefully drawn plan can preserve evidence no longer visible. The modern excavator joins the long chain of people deciding what the sanctuary means. Perhaps this is the final unease within reconstruction. The lost priesthood does not return unchanged through archaeology. It returns through modern questions, methods, expectations, and limits. You can recover walls. You can identify food, smoke, water, and movement. You can estimate where people stood and how sound travelled, yet the central act remains just beyond reach. No instrument records reverence. No residue preserves intention. No trench reveals the moment when an ordinary bowl became sacred within the hands of a trained priest. The evidence forms a careful outline around that absence. Its edges grow clearer, but its centre remains quiet. The mound of Abu Shahrain rests beneath a white afternoon sky. Wind moves across its slopes, lifting dust from walls that no longer rise above the ground. The marshes have withdrawn, and the nearest water now lies far beyond the horizon. You walk slowly among the exposed foundations. Low lines of mud brick mark chambers, once entered with caution. A doorway opens into sunlight. A platform ends beneath drifting sand. Broken pottery glitters faintly where the surface has been disturbed by heat. Weather and passing feet, nothing announces that this was once sacred. There are no lamps, curtains, singers, or sealed vessels. No fragrance of resin remains within the air. Only the wind crosses every boundary without permission, moving freely through places once guarded by trained attendants. Eridu survives as an arrangement of absences. Researchers associated with the University of Chicago and Oxford have examined how early Mesopotamian sacred centers developed through repeated construction. The temple sequence at Eridu remains among the most important examples of long religious continuity within one location. That continuity is visible in brick. Its inner meaning is not. You step over a wall whose upper courses disappeared thousands of years ago. The bricks beneath your feet contain clay gathered from a landscape shaped by water, reeds, fish, and human labour. Their surfaces were pressed by hands whose owners left no written names. Those hands built for permanence using material that constantly returned to earth. The contradiction feels appropriate. Cities promise endurance, yet their walls dissolve. Priesthoods promise memory, yet their words fade. Rituals promise order, yet every careful sequence eventually reaches a final performance. No priest knows when that final performance has arrived. Perhaps the last liturgy at Eridu occurred during a season of hardship. The population may have been shrinking while channels changed, and fields became less dependable. Roofs needed repair. Supplies arrived irregularly, and younger families looked towards settlements offering better prospects. A small group still entered the sanctuary. They prepared the chamber according to inherited practice. They brought water, food, cloth, and flame. Their movements carried dignity. Although the city outside had begun falling silent, no tablet records their names, no inscription that declares that worship would end. They may have believed the temple would open again within days. Perhaps they had expected returning workers, renewed canals, or help from a distant ruler. Human beings rarely recognize endings while standing inside them. The final bread was placed upon the table, the final lamp was trimmed, the final spoken formula entered the room and vanished. Then the doors remained closed. Archaeologists continue debating why Eridu declined, and how environmental, political, and economic changes combined across its long history. Shifting waterways likely affected settlement patterns, while newer centres drew power, labour, and trade toward themselves. No single cause explains every abandoned wall. A city can weaken through many small departures. One canal becomes unreliable, one workshop closes, one family leaves. A festival attracts fewer visitors, and fewer offerings enter the storerooms. The sacred centre grows quieter without collapsing dramatically. This kind of ending leaves little evidence. Destruction produces ash, weapons, fallen walls, and hurried burials. Gradual departure produces swept rooms, empty shelves, and doors nobody returns to open. Silence can be archaeologically difficult. You pause beside a shallow depression where rainwater briefly gathers during rare storms. For a moment, the surface reflects the sky. A small bird lands near the edge, drinks, then disappears beyond the mound. Water returns only briefly, Some local traditions have imagined that hidden channels still move beneath Eridu, preserving a distant connection with Enki's freshwater domain. Such stories belong to later memory rather than archaeological proof, yet they suit the place. A city devoted to hidden water now stands within dryness. Its god remains associated with abundance, while the ruins endure beneath a landscape stripped of their ancient marshes. The contrast encourages fringe speculation. Some writers claim that chambers beneath the mound still contain sealed tablets revealing forbidden creation rituals. Others imagine underground rooms preserved below the earliest excavated levels, protected by water or collapsed brick. No reliable evidence confirms such hidden archives. The attraction lies within incompleteness. Excavation has revealed much, but never everything. Unopened ground allows imagination to place secrets wherever evidence has not yet reached. Perhaps the greatest missing archive was never made from clay. It existed within trained bodies. A priest knew the exact angle of a raised vessel. A singer knew where breath entered a difficult line. An attendant knew how long to leave the offering unseen. Those details vanished when teaching stopped. Writing preserves instructions, but ritual also depends upon habits that practitioners consider too obvious to record. A tablet may say that water is poured. It may not say how the wrist turns, how the vessel is supported, or how silence surrounds the act. The body carries its own manuscript. When the final trained body disappears, entire passages vanish without leaving broken fragments. No museum can display the missing pause between two gestures. You sit upon a low wall as evening approaches. The surface remains warm from the sun. Beyond the mound, the plain stretches outward beneath bands of pale gold and violet. Wind scratches softly through dry plants growing between ancient rooms. The world feels empty, though it is not. Insects move beneath stones. Birds cross the open sky. Shepherds may pass at a distance, following paths that ignore the old ceremonial boundaries. Life continues without asking what the ruins once meant. This indifference can feel unsettling. Eridu was imagined as a beginning, a place where kingship, wisdom, and ordered life first entered human experience. Yet the modern landscape does not preserve that importance visibly. Sacred memory needs human attention. Without it, a holy platform becomes a rise in the soil. A divine chamber becomes a rectangle measured in an excavation report. A liturgy becomes a possibility discussed among specialists. Still, the possibility has weight. A mainstream historical fact remains firm beneath every uncertain interpretation. People return to this sacred location repeatedly across an immense span of time. They rebuilt upon older foundations instead of abandoning the ground completely. That choice expresses devotion. It may also express fear, identity, tradition, or political interest. Motives can overlap without cancelling one another. A sanctuary can be loved sincerely while supporting authority and wealth. The open scholarly debate concerns what endured through those rebuilding phases. Did worshippers preserve one continuous sacred identity from the earliest temple into later Enki traditions? Did later priests reinterpret an older sanctuary through newer mythology? Or did several religious worlds occupy the same ground while claiming unbroken continuity? No surviving evidence settles the matter completely. The walls reveal sequence, the texts reveal later memory, the space between them remains uncertain. Perhaps the oldest rituals were simpler than later liturgies suggest. Perhaps no elaborate priesthood existed within the earliest buildings. A household leader may have placed fish, grain, or water upon a platform without hymns, ranks, or hidden knowledge. Complexity could have grown gradually. A repeated offering becomes a custom requires a caretaker trains an assistant, the assistant inherits an office acquires titles, garments, property, and guarded instructions. Eventually, the institution appears ancient even to those serving within it. This development does not make the ritual less meaningful. It reveals how human attention builds sacred systems over generations. Each person receives something incomplete, adds structure, and passes it onward. The forgotten liturgy may therefore have possessed no single original form. It may have been a river rather than a monument. Words entered from one period, gestures changed in another. Political claims gathered around older offerings. Scribes preserved some portions while allowing others to disappear. The rite survived by never remaining entirely still. You look toward the place where Enki's sanctuary once stood highest above the settlement. The foundations hold no statue now. There is no throne, no vessel, and no priest waiting behind a curtain. Yet the emptiness does not feel entirely vacant. Human expectation remains attached to the space. You know that people once approached carefully, believing their actions affected water, health, order, and the favour of unseen powers. Their belief cannot be excavated directly. Its pressure remains within everything they built. Perhaps liturgy is remembered most deeply through repetition rather than explanation. A person kneels because others knelt. A hand lifts water because another hand demonstrated the movement. Meaning enters through imitation. Then one day, no teacher remains. The movement survives briefly in uncertain memory. A child recalls seeing it but never learned the words. A traveller repeats part of the action elsewhere, joining it with another prayer to see. The ceremony becomes an echo, the echo becomes a symbol, the symbol becomes a mystery. You remain upon the mound as the last sunlight leaves the exposed walls. Colours soften until brick, sand, and shadow begin merging into one quiet surface. The city disappears gently. Nothing closes its gates. Nothing announces that the ancient world has withdrawn. You breathe more slowly now, allowing the wind to pass across the empty rooms without needing to interpret every sound. The ruins do not demand a conclusion. They ask only for patient attention, and the sky deepens above Eridu. Its first stars appear where temple smoke once climbed into darkness. The air cools against your face, carrying no incense, only dust and distant grass. You can let the unanswered questions rest. Perhaps the priests believed their words reached Enki beneath the earth. Perhaps the words mainly reached frightened, hopeful, and exhausted human listeners gathered within the sanctuary. Both possibilities hold tenderness. People came because water failed, children suffered, rulers worried, and dreams disturbed the night. They came because life felt uncertain, and uncertainty becomes easier when given rhythm, gesture, and shared language. Their ceremonies did not make the world safe. They made danger bearable. You picture one final vessel resting upon a dark floor. Moonlight touches its rim through a narrow opening. No hand lifts it, yet the imagined water remains still inside. Let that image soften. The walls around you lower into shadow. The dry plain grows quiet, and the ancient city releases every name it once carried. Your breathing follows the slow movement of invisible water beneath imagined ground. Each breath arrives without effort, remains briefly, then passes onward. Nothing needs solving tonight. The missing words may remain missing. The broken tablets may keep their silence. The oldest priest may continue walking beyond the reach of history, carrying a bowl whose purpose nobody can fully recover. You do not need to follow him. The path fades among reeds that no longer grow here. His lamp becomes smaller, warmer, and more distant until it resembles one low star near the horizon. The temple rests. The city rests. The deep waters rest beneath all remembered things. You can leave the uncovered walls beneath the turning sky. Wind will move through them. Sand will settle along their edges, and morning will return without disturbing their sleep. Perhaps memory does not preserve the past completely. Perhaps it preserves only enough to remind you that other people also feared darkness. sought wisdom, and listened for order within the quiet. Their voices are gone, but their longing feels familiar. You carry that small recognition away from Eridu. It asks for no answer and demands no certainty. The night opens gently around you, and perhaps the story is not yet complete. Good night.